The story begins in a certain town. The chosen ones receive a blessing from the gods known as the gift. Observing the people from the window, a young boy named Luke noticed that they were quite lively today. A man covered in dark clothing, Luke's father, responded that today was the day Luke would receive his gift. The people were excited to see Luke's gift and the next battle-ready lord. The power of the royal family had dwindled, and in that vacuum, many lords grabbed whatever territory they could. Luke, the son of the Lord, was the most excited to receive a combat gift. One's genetics have a great impact on the gift they obtain. Luke's mother received the gift of swordsmanship, while his father received an even higher rank, holy swordsmanship. Luke's father was known across the land for his strength and gallant acts in battle. Due to his stunning reputation, Luke's father rose from Viscount to Marquis in a single generation. As his father counted on him, Luke smiled, reciprocating his father's wish. As the priest silenced the people around, he then announced Luke's gift, which surprised everyone. Luke, who received the gift of village building, was surprised the most and was curious about what kind of gift it was. The priest, unable to give a direct answer, only told Luke that he wasn't sure if the gift would be useful in combat. As the people started gossiping, worried about their future, another young kid named Raoul asked Luke to move over as he was next to receive a gift. The people were now worried for Raoul, who might also receive an unknown gift like his brother. However, they were all surprised and cheered as Raoul received the gift of holy swordsmanship. Seeing how his father and the others were so happy, Luke noticed his mother's disappointed look towards him. Knowing the reality ahead of him, as Luke was about to leave, he was no longer surprised that no one came to send him off. Luke knew that the only reason people attended to him was that he was the son of the Lord and the next in line. On a lonely journey, Luke was now headed north to the uninhabited wilderness in the house of Albert's domain. Luke was tasked by his brother to develop the savage and barren land to exile him. Noticing that not one person opposed Raoul, Luke assumed that they all wished for him to pretty much drop dead. Luke knew that his brother was best suited to be the next lord, as he was always the best in combat. Despite all of Luke's training, he never wanted to kill people. The House of Albert has long been a house of warriors, but for some reason Luke was the odd one out. After a week's journey, Luke finally arrived at his destined place. However, he did not expect it to be much worse. The area was surrounded by a vast forest in the north and a huge mountain range in the east. Luke had to be cautious as there were tons of creatures roaming around those areas. Wondering how he would handle all of the problems in front of him, Luke was surprised to see Melia behind him. As Melia tried encouraging Luke, she noticed that he was not that upset. Melia was amazed at how positive Luke was despite the dire situation they were in. When Luke saw the carriage leaving, he asked Melia if she really wanted to stay with him. Melia reminded Luke that when she became his private maid, she swore that no matter what, she would serve to the bitter end. Though they smiled for each other's appreciation, Melia had a different motive. Melia followed Luke since she was a raging Shota-loving fiend, and Luke was exactly her type. Melia made Luke realize that he only had two options. First was to try his best to make something out of the barren land. However, the food they brought could only last them a month, and there was no way to cultivate and harvest crops during that time. Hunting was an option for them, but it would be risky. The second option was running away with Melia and starting a new life in a new city. Luke knew that Melia was more keen to choose the latter option since it was the most realistic one. But ever since Luke received the gift of village building, he has not been able to use it. Not knowing what the power actually was, Luke felt like he can now put it to good use. When a notification window suddenly showed up in front of Luke, he had a surprised reaction which made Melia worry that her true feelings were showing. As Melia was near Luke's face, Luke asked her to step back. Luke noticed that the letters in the window were not of this world, but oddly he felt that they were familiar to him. Luke had memories of his past, though he does not remember what kind of person he was before. Those exact memories were the reason why Luke always felt a little different from everyone else in the world. Not sure what is being displayed on the screen, Luke decided to try making a village. All of a sudden, the ground surrounding Luke and Melia leveled out. Seeing the list of buildable facilities, Luke wondered if the facilities would just appear out of nowhere if he picked one. Realizing that they had to sleep somewhere, Luke decided to build a hut. After a hut suddenly showed up in front of them, Luke then knew that it was his gift. When Luke asked Melia if they should build another hut or a well, Melia immediately suggested building a well as she wanted to always spend the night with Luke, but she also gave good points on why they needed a well. Melia was amazed when Luke built a well out of nothing. Excited about what's next to be built, Melia suggested a field. All of a sudden, a window popped up in front of Melia, informing Luke that she can be added as a villager. After informing Melia of the window he was seeing, Melia smiled and asked Luke to make her his villager. Noticing that he receives a point a day for each villager, Melia hugged Luke as she wished for it to be the only two of them in the village. As night came, Luke remembered the feeling of hopelessness after receiving the gift of village building. But now he realized that he actually preferred the gift he received instead of the combat gift. Luke did not like war since it was all about taking land and killing each other. Luke made up his mind that he would use his power to cultivate the barren land and build his own village. As Luke closed his eyes thinking of amazing things he could build in the town, he felt a little discomfort as Melia kept sniffing his hair. A young lady named Selin told her father that she was leaving home. Seeing her father's confused look, Selin explained that she could not take it anymore, as it was her last straw. Selin understood the severity of the current times and that lords would marry off their kids for political convenience. However, she couldn't stand the thought of being married off to Raoul. As her father insisted that Raoul was Lord Albert's successor, Selin ran away, expressing her preference to marry someone else instead of Raoul. When the guards tried blocking her way, Selin immediately warned them that they would get hurt if they tried to stop her. The guards froze in fear as they could only let Selin walk away. In the barren land, Luke realized that he really needed to make a new hut since it was difficult for him to sleep with Melia. Luke was surprised when Melia had awoken exactly as he woke up. When Melia mentioned that it was her duty as a villager to wake up early for her master, Luke reminded her that she was now a villager, not a maid. However, even after explaining her role, Melia was still adamant about supporting and helping Luke however she could. Seeing Luke's face, Melia remembered the day she arrived at Lord Albert's castle. Melia was the second daughter of a low-ranking noble family. Since she would never receive the blessings any large donation would pay for, Melia had two options. She could either marry into another low-ranking noble family or become a maid for a high-ranking noble. Melia then became a maid for the Albert family, who at the time had been rapidly gaining land and power. But for someone like Melia who had no experience as a maid, she constantly struggled on the job. When Melia accidentally broke Madame Isabella's most cherished dish, Melia was surprised when Luke took the blame for her. After hearing Madame Isabella's sermon, Melia immediately cleaned the broken dish. As she watched Luke, she was surprised that he turned and told Melia that his mother won't get mad if it was him. At that moment, the 3-year-old Luke captured the 12-year-old heart of Melia. When Luke finally accumulated 20 points, he was excited as he could now make a field. Melia tried giving Luke a heads up that fieldwork was not easy. However, Luke did not wish to be coddled as he wanted to do what he could with his own hands since the village was his very own. Seeing the smart, kind, and cute Luke doing his best, Melia felt she could die. Out of focus, Luke reminded Melia of the seeds that she suddenly threw. At night while taking a bath, Luke was tired after making the field and planting the seeds. When he heard a strange sound out in the forest, Luke had decided to set up facilities for their defense as he can't rely on the hopes that they won't always get attacked. After building the watchtower day after day, Luke worked and built whatever he could for his village. After a few days, both Luke and Melia were so excited after seeing the field sprouting. Hearing the same sound the night before, Luke wondered if it was a beast. When Melia tried to take a look at the watchtower, she realized that Luke would see her undergarments at her angle. As Melia's heart was racing thinking of allowing Luke to see, she was slightly disappointed when Luke was looking elsewhere. When Melia finally saw the cause, Melia reported that a group of goblins was headed towards them. With no other option left, Luke went ahead and charged at the goblin's location. When the goblin tried to land an attack, Luke felt confident in handling the goblins after assessing that they were not fast enough. After defeating the goblins one by one, Luke froze when he saw that a goblin with a knife was about to kill him. Fortunately for Luke, he was saved by Selin, who threw an object right through the goblin's head. The person who saved Luke from the goblin was Selin Bajrata, also known as the Iceblade Princess. Selin is the daughter of a count and was gifted with dual-wielding and Liven's magic, allowing her to fight with 2 blades and use water and ice magic. Selin was also Luke's former fiancée. Luke asked Selin why she was at his village. Selin was more surprised at how much Luke had grown after not seeing each other for 2 years. Luke was surprised when Selin revealed that she had run away from home. Luke couldn't believe that Selin had cut ties with her family after learning that she was going to be forced to marry Raoul. Hearing how determined Selin was to not marry Raoul, as she would rather die than marry him, Luke became nervous as he did not know that Selin was against the marriage. Selin was surprised when Luke apologized for arranging her marriage to their family, to which she clarified to Luke that she did not want to marry Raoul but was fine if it was Luke. When Selin tried to confess her feelings, Melia immediately hit her with her knees and asked Selin to stop with the private talks. Seeing Selin's confused look, Melia introduced herself as the first villager, which made no sense to Selin. Melia then explained that they are in Luke's village and she was his first villager. Selin was worried after learning that Luke was sent out to a barren land to develop it, but was surprised when she saw that they had a mud wall, watchtower, well, and a crop. Seeing Selin's confused expression, Luke told her that it would be much faster for her to see that they built everything. When Luke built a storehouse, Selin was in total disbelief as a building just happened to show up out of thin air. Luke revealed that it was his gift that made him able to build facilities. Though there were some limitations, Luke still could build most of the parts that they needed. Selin was now more amazed at how great Luke's gift was. Luke then noticed that a notification to have Selin as a villager showed up, and thought to himself that it was not a good idea to have Selin in a barren place. Luke wondered if Selin would be fine, as he knew that the House of Albert would not stay still about the engagement business. But Luke knew that it was the House of Count Bajrata that would cause more commotion since they lack military strength. By marrying their kids, the House of Bajrata would avoid becoming the enemy of House Albert. Selin reassured Luke that the Alberts wouldn't waste time being angry at the Bajratas. She was confident that if the Bajratas make any more enemies, they'll end up being completely surrounded. Selin also knew that her family would be fine since her younger brother just received a powerful gift. When Selin decided to live at Luke's village after assessing it, Luke was surprised after hearing Selin's decision. Luke was surprised when Selin became a villager even though he did not push the yes option. Luke's frustration slightly subsided after noticing that his daily points had increased to 12. Luke then pointed out to Selin that with her gifts, he was sure that she could find a much better place to live than his village. When Selin asked if her presence is going to be an issue for them, Luke could not give a straight answer as he had a different intention for Selin. As a dark aura came from Melia, the two women glared at each other intensely. Luke became curious as to why the two were glaring at each other when it was the first time they had ever seen each other. When Melia informed Selin that they do not have showers nor a proper bed, she pointed out that it will be difficult for Selin, who was from a noble family. Selin, however, did not back down as she also pointed out that they need her to fight off monsters like the goblin. Realizing that Selin had a point, Melia half-heartedly accepted Selin. However, she reminded her that as the first villager, she was her senior. Thinking that Melia was trying to assert dominance over her, Melia explained that it was not the case since she already felt sorry for Selin just with the breast size alone. Insulted by Melia's words, Selin tried explaining the huge difference between a flat-chested and someone who has cup size. Selin eventually shut her mouth after losing the argument. As night came again and they were about to sleep, Selin was surprised after seeing Melia and Luke so close. Curious if they have been sleeping in such a tiny space, Melia glared at her and asked if she had any problem. Melia did not want to force Selin to sleep in their hut and suggested that she sleep outside. As the two women argued once again, Luke somewhat regretted not making another hut. When Luke suggested that he would sleep in the storehouse, Selin and Melia kept pushing that the other would sleep in the storehouse instead of Luke. When Luke decided to sleep at the storehouse, Selin and Melia stopped him as they decided to coexist in the same hut. As the two slept quietly, Luke, who was uncomfortable, could not sleep at all. Back when Selin was 10 years old, she had the opportunity to visit Albert Castle. As her father reminded Selin that she would be meeting her future husband, she didn't care at all. While walking along the grounds of the Albert estate, she noticed a rock being thrown towards her. Peeking into the bushes, Selin saw Raoul and thought he was Luke. She was surprised when she saw another kid being tied up, about to be hit by Raoul. As Raoul planned to target the kid's face, Selin immediately dashed towards them and asked what he was doing. She requested Raoul to stop, warning that he might endanger the kid's life if he hid in a dangerous spot. However, Raoul did not want to be stopped and threw the rock right at the kid. As the rock was about to hit the kid's face, Luke suddenly appeared between them and blocked the rock with his head. Selin was surprised and immediately tended to Luke's care as his head was bleeding. When Raoul saw Luke getting injured, he hastily ran away while telling Luke that he was not the target. Selin later found out about Raoul's identity as Luke's little brother. She also remembered the feeling of relief after learning that the kind-looking boy was Luke. A few years later, Selin and Luke met again. Selin asked if Luke ever brought up his father about Luke's violent actions. However, Luke did not want to tarnish his brother's reputation further. Luke knew that people were not so kind towards Raoul since he was the son of a concubine. Seeing how kind Luke was to his brother, Selin felt glad that she was to be married to Luke rather than his violent brother. In the current time, Luke was happy as he finally saved up 50 points and was excited to build a small house. Since Selin came to his village, Luke had been sleeping between Melia and Selin in the tiny hut. Luke wished for that discomfort to end by building a small house. After building the house, Luke and the others peeked inside and were amazed as the place was full of furniture. Both Selin and Melia were very curious as it was their first time seeing a modern kitchen. As Luke explained the things they were curious about, Melia was amazed, realizing that cooking was now much easier. Luke then presented the bathroom with enthusiasm. After showing the two how the toilet works, Luke froze as he could not answer when Selin asked where the feces would go. Both Selin and Melia ended up theorizing and assumed that lower servants would be collecting it. Assuming a much greater power behind how the toilet works, Selin realized and was excited to learn that they would no longer need to use the well outside. Melia was in shock, feeling her strength dwindling, knowing that she could no longer see Luke bathe at night. Luke then revealed another feature of the house. They could now sleep separately since there were 2 bedrooms. Selin and Melia were in total disbelief as they did not want to stay in a room with each other. Remembering that the two do not get along, Luke decided that they would sleep together in the same room. Luke planned to sleep on the floor while the two took turns sleeping on the bed. However, he now felt uncomfortable as the three of them were cramped on the bed. Melia did not want Luke to sleep on the bed, while Selin, on the other hand, would have been fine on the floor but did not want to sleep beside Melia. With no other option left, the two ladies decided that it was much better for them to sleep in the same bed. Luke was now being suffocated, so he squeezed his way out since he could not sleep comfortably. Time flew for Luke, as it had already been a month since he developed the barren land. Thanks to his gift for village building, the development proceeded without any problems. Selin surprised Luke with a boar and explained that she had hunted it down in the northern forest. Luke was concerned, thinking that the north was a dangerous place. Selin agreed but mentioned that if one doesn't go too deep into the forest, it's fine. After informing Luke that she could make food last long using her ice magic and boasting about obtaining more meat, Selin glanced at Melia with a condescending look. Melia, on the other hand, didn't back down. She pointed out that she had been preparing the food and insulted Selin for not knowing how to cook and butcher meat. While trying to prove she knew how to butcher meat, Selin noticed something that caught Luke's attention. Selin shared that she heard a voice coming from a large group. Luke was amazed when they saw a group of people in the distance. Luke assessed that the people might not be a threat since they were mostly women and children. Seeing their exhausted looks, Luke remembered a recent battle and assumed they might be refugees. Knowing that other than his village, the area was a wasteland with no fresh water or food nearby, Luke, compassionate, couldn't ignore the worn-down refugees and welcomed them to his village. The frail man named Berlit was surprised to learn that Luke was the head of the village. He introduced himself as the leader of his group. Seeing they looked like they were about to faint, Luke offered them water from the well. The people were happy and grateful for Luke's kind action. As Luke demonstrated how to use the village's well, they were astonished, as it was the first time they had seen that type of well. Feeling the water in their hands, the group immediately drank and replenished themselves. Noticing some were still waiting for their turn to drink, Luke decided to build another well. When Luke called their attention, the people were surprised, as they hadn't seen the well earlier. Luke then whispered to Melia to prepare the boar that Melia had hunted earlier. As the group finally sat down and rested, Berlit revealed that they had left their village behind. Most of their men were drafted, and the older folks stayed behind, insisting they'd be an extra burden. Berlit's father, the village head, insisted on staying and placed Berlit as the leader. They wandered with nowhere to go until Berlit and the others found themselves in the barren wasteland. It was a stroke of luck when they happened to spot Luke's village just as they were about to run out of food and water. Learning of their dire situation, Luke wanted to offer them lots of food, but the crops weren't ready to be harvested yet. Luke instead offered them delicious meat from the boar Selin hunted. As the freshly cooked meat was placed and prepared, Berlit and everyone else ate and cried, finally able to enjoy something delicious. Seeing how the group he was leading was now happy and had survived their journey, Berlit couldn't hold back his tears and expressed gratitude to Luke. Luke knew that Berlit's group hadn't yet reached the end of their hardships, as it was impossible for them to survive in the wastelands. Luke took a leap of faith and offered Berlit and everyone else to live in his village. Luke shared that they lacked people to help in fieldwork. Berlit was worried since there were too many, mostly women and children. Understanding Berlit's concern, Luke knew that with their current supply, it would be difficult to feed everyone. Luke shared that he had been relying on wheat and seeds from the castle. Since the three of them hadn't done enough to survive in the wasteland, Luke asked for Berlit's help. Seeing how genuine Luke's eyes were, Berlit closed his eyes and accepted Luke's offer. While the others were enjoying their rest, Luke was surprised when multiple notifications flashed behind him. When Berlit's caravan of 51 people became Luke's villagers, Luke received a bounty of benefits from his gift. Initially scared, Luke was surprised when he could no longer see anything but screens. Skimming through the layers of notification windows, Luke was surprised and wondered about the skills shown in the window. After gaining more villagers, Luke later realized that he had earned a bunch of points. As the area of his village increased, Luke saw a skill notification and wondered what those were. When he tried moving his finger, he was shocked to learn that he could move the facilities so easily, which he found very useful. Luke felt relieved as he no longer had to worry about arranging the facilities. He then noticed Berlit trembling and realized that he was now scared as he saw the buildings move on their own. Thinking that he had gone crazy from exhaustion, Berlit ended up passing out. Luke then tried explaining that what Berlit saw was his gift. Luke's new villagers were impressed by Luke's gift, as it was the first time they had ever seen one. Luke realized that common folk do not get to see gifts all that often. It was a first for Luke to be treated so kindly after how people were towards him at the castle. As he shared his gift with the kids, Luke felt a little down after hearing the kids wishing they'd get the gift of holy swordsmanship. Luke was no longer surprised, as the gift of combat was pretty much what everyone wished for. Making homes for his new villagers, Luke decided to build a row house that had 5 living spaces, each containing 2 rooms and a dining area. One room alone was huge enough for a family of 5. Since the rooms did not come with baths, Luke planned to build them one. However, it was not listed in his facilities. Luke apologized and informed them that they'd have to use one of the wells to take a bath. Realizing that one row house could fit 25 people and cost 80 points, Luke decided to make more of it. After expanding the crops and building walls for the part of the village, Luke was immediately exhausted, as his village point was now at 214. As the villagers were amazed at how huge the crops and houses were, Luke informed them that they could just begin tomorrow as he had to rest. Relieved that his new villagers looked nice, Luke remembered that he had a skill called Assess Villager. When he tried using it, he was surprised when a window showed up in front of him, showing the information of that specific villager. Feeling guilty for looking at private information, Luke noticed a gift in the notification and asked the villager if he had a gift. The villager responded that he had none since there weren't any churches around that would give them blessings. Luke wondered if the man received a blessing. Would that blessing be his gift? When Luke shared his skill with Melia and Selin, the two were happy that Luke had such a skill but unsure how that works. When Selin asked Luke to try the skill on her, Luke informed Selin of her stats. Confused, Selin asked what village loyalty was. Luke explained that it is the sense of loyalty and pride toward the village. Villagers with low village loyalty are prone to committing crimes and rebelling, which caution was advised. After learning how the Assess Villager skill works, Selin suggested using the skill on everyone since they were going to need the manpower to keep their large community running. Luke did not want to impose his skill on those who wanted to keep things private. Selin tried making Luke realize that his ability may be vital in keeping the village safe, and that he did not need to tell them that they were being assessed. When Selin suggested for Melia to also get checked out, Melia was getting nervous and asked if the skill could read minds. Noticing that Selin was curious about what was on her mind, Melia left the room as she did not want to reveal her secret to Luke. Thinking that Melia may be just tired, Luke visited Berlit and asked him for his personal information. Luke explained that he was collecting references so that assigning them jobs would be easier. After sharing his personal information, Berlit then introduced his younger brother, Barlat. One by one, Luke gathered and saw all of the villagers' personal information. After gathering the data of all the people that lived in his village, Luke never thought that he would find 4 people with potential gifts like Barlat. When Selin checked up on Luke about his assessment, she got excited upon learning that there were 4 people who have a gift. Selin informed Luke that only the church or someone with an oracle gift could bestow one upon another person. On top of that, they had no money to donate, which frustrated her. Back at school, Luke was taught that 50% of the nobles had gifts while the commoners only had less than 1%. However, in the village that mostly consisted of commoners, they had 4 people with gifts. Thinking that if what they discovered was not just a coincidence, Luke wondered if people were led to believe that most commoners do not have gifts. The large monetary donation needed to get a gift prevents the commoners from ever knowing that they possess a gift. Luke could only theorize the corruption between the church and the nobles. Wondering if he was getting ahead of himself, Luke's attention was called by Melia, and was surprised when he saw her dump a bucket of water all over herself. When Luke asked what was wrong, Melia ripped her clothing and told Luke that he may now inspect her as she was no longer carrying dubious feelings. Confused by Melia's action at first, Luke ended up agreeing and used the skill on Melia. Selin thought that it would be funny, and asked Luke to read the information aloud. After reading Melia's status out loud, all of them were surprised to learn that Melia had the gift of an oracle. 3 days had passed since they gained new members in their village. Even though they learned that Melia had the gift of oracle, it still lay dormant since there was no way in the village for her to receive a blessing. Luke heard rumors that people end up receiving gifts after years of praying at the church. The problem was that they didn't even have a church. Berlit called Luke's attention and informed him that the vegetables Luke planted were almost ready to be harvested. Berlit was surprised at how big the vegetables were, as he had never seen anything like it. When Berlit guessed that it may be because of the soil, Luke smiled as he remembered that the field he made had the benefit of good quality soil. As they harvested the vegetables, Barlat was very impressed at how many they were able to gather. After thanking everyone for helping with the harvest, Luke heard others talk about how delicious the vegetables were. Luke decided to hold a celebration for the new villagers and the harvest. When Luke and Selin offered to help with the cooking, Melia was touched by Luke's actions. Even though Luke has the highest rank in the village, he was still so eager to help with menial tasks. As Melia was about to compliment Luke, she immediately asked him to stop since he was cutting the vegetables incorrectly. After suggesting to Luke to just wash the vegetables, Selin did not want to be left out and showed her slicing skills. However, she ended up slicing the whole table, which annoyed Melia. While Luke and Selin did their part in the kitchen, Melia had already served the food for their celebration. The villagers were so excited as they couldn't remember the last time they had a feast. Noticing that the other villagers were looking at him, Luke wondered what was that about. The villagers then requested Luke to give their celebration a toast. After thanking everyone for helping with the harvest, Luke initiated the celebration by giving a warming toast. Berlit's eyes glowed as he very much liked the food. Berlit and his brother had no idea that good quality food could be grown on barren land. As they complimented the facilities Luke made, they also shared their worries after first hearing about Luke's gift. Luke's attention was again called by the others as he was informed that a group of people was approaching the village. After seeing the refugees from the watchtower, Berlit immediately noticed a familiar face and called the man out. When Luke became curious about their identities, Berlit introduced them as citizens from another village with whom they often interacted. Noticing that they were all very worn down, Donga explained that there was no longer anything they could do other than leave the village. When Donga mentioned how impressed he was with Berlit for managing to resettle on a wasteland, Berlit corrected him and revealed that they just arrived a few days ago, introducing Luke as the village head. Donga was confused at first, but evidently shook Luke's hand and introduced himself as the refugees' leader. Seeing how tired Donga's people were, Luke told them that they can discuss details later after they enjoy themselves with the food and the party. Though others were shy to join them, Luke smiled as he insisted and told everyone that any friend of Berlit was also a friend of his. The day ended with everyone enjoying the celebration. Morning came and Luke was immediately greeted by his new villagers. Seeing how Berlit and Donga were working very hard, Luke guessed that they would receive another good harvest. After the party, Donga's group decided to stay and live in the village. They were very happy as they could now eat delicious food and have a proper place to stay. With the addition of 44 villagers, they now have a total of 97 people. Luke created more row houses and added 4 more fields just in case they were short on vegetables. Thanks to the quality harvest, Luke's village still had a surplus of food. The same with Berlit's group. Donga's group was also mostly women and children. Among them, 4 have potential gifts. Unfortunately, they could not use the gift since they could not receive a blessing. Pleased that his village had grown so much, Luke's attention was called as he was informed that there was another group of possible refugees coming to the village. Guessing that the impact of war had spread so far, Luke asked how many people were there. He was surprised after hearing that there were about 70 people incoming. Luke felt somewhat weird when he offered settlement for Berlit's group. He was not scared at all. But since their village was already occupied by 97 people, Luke was worried about extending help to another huge number of people, as he would be responsible for everyone in the village. Luke was scared that he might put everyone's lives in jeopardy. Seeing Luke standing in silence, Salin told Luke that they could no longer accommodate them as there were no longer rooms available. Salin explained that their village was already full. Giving the incoming refugees would only hurt them down the line. Salin made Luke realize that though his gift was great, there was still a limit to how many people he could look after. After informing Luke that he did not have to make the hard decisions, Salin offered to talk to the refugees herself. When Luke tried to stop Salin, he was told by Berlit and Donga that Salin was correct and to leave everything to them. Both Donga and Berlit ended up meeting with the refugees themselves. Melia comforted Luke as she reassured him that everything would be fine and that she would always be there to back him up. Seeing Selend and Melia start another argument, Luke realized Selen's point. However, Luke felt like he would regret it if he turned them away now. Luke promised to try his best to make sure his choices won't cause anyone trouble. Knowing that his choices would also affect the people under him, Luke asked for everyone to back him up in case things go bad. Hearing Luke's words as well as his resolve, Melia and the others were now even more impressed with Luke as they promised to help him. Luke ended up meeting with the refugees who were known as Leon's caravan that consisted of 76 people. As another influx of people pushed Luke's village over 100, their village level was now level 4. With the level up, Luke gained a bonus of 1,000 village points, more facilities, more village space, and a new skill called Facility Upgrade. With the extra village space, it gave Luke some room to move things around and added new row houses and wells. Knowing that each time the village leveled up, the land more than doubled, Luke wondered how big the village could get. Thinking ahead of himself again, Luke chose to focus more on another important matter, which was the ability to make a church. The potential benefit of building a church was huge, as usually only people of the church could bestow blessings. Luke decided to build one since it was much better than having no church. After building the church, Luke felt a sense of nostalgia and remembered the time when he and Raoul received their gifts. After seeing the church Luke built, Melia mentioned that the feeling she used to get in a church was now much stronger. Seeing Melia moving around so much inside the church, Luke told her that she might end up receiving her gift because of her faith. Realizing the opportunity to help Luke out, Melia's eyes glowed with excitement and told Luke that she would pray from dusk till dawn. Ever since building the church, Melia had been cooped up in the church. As for Luke's new skill, Facility Upgrade, Luke tried using it to improve the storehouses and ended up giving him a few options. When he tried it with the fields, he also received the same options. Luke realized that they could save more space if they could harvest more. He then replaced the plaster walls with stone walls and changed the small houses to a medium one. A few days had passed and Luke wanted to check up on Melia. Luke was surprised at how Melia changed. Upon seeing Luke at the church, Melia immediately hugged him as she revealed that she had gained the gift of Oracle. Melia was very grateful towards Luke as she couldn't believe that she received the gift without a priest. Seeing how Melia was getting so close to Luke, she felt that it was wrong to allow Melia to become a lewd priestess. Luke then gathered everyone from the village and told them that they all have the potential to receive a gift. The village showed a hint of doubt since they only knew that nobles were the only ones who could receive the gifts. Luke shared that some families were more likely to receive one and that their status did not really matter. Luke knew that what he was saying might be difficult to believe, which he suggested that they at least try. When Melia called upon Barlat and gave him the gift of swordsmanship, Barlat felt a weird sensation. As the crowd became more excited, some even suggested making Barlat a sword out of wood. Luke offered Barlat his sword since he knew that it was more useful in Barlat's hands. Barlat, who had never wielded a sword before, felt right after holding one. Even though he was no longer young, Barlat was still grateful and promised that he would become strong enough to keep their village safe. As everyone became excited, Melia gave those who had potential the gift that they were laying dormant within them. Some were a bit disappointed while others cheered since the village Noel, who was only 13 years old, received the gift of holy swordsmanship. Out of the many people they had in the village, only 17 had a potential gift. Since 4 of those were only children, Luke decided not to grant them a gift yet, as it would take a toll on their bodies while growing up. As Luke and Melia gave them the gifts, Luke hoped that their food supply and defense would give everyone peace of mind. Seeing Perun and Barlat spar, Berlit and Luke were very impressed since they were improving at a really fast rate. Berlit was jealous as he realized now that the power of the gift was special. Knowing the power that the gift holds, Luke finally understood why his father wanted them to obtain the holy swordsmanship so badly. Selin was impressed by her students and decided that the next time she went hunting, she would bring them along. Luke became jealous as well after learning that Selin had become a teacher, even though they were of the same age. The women of the village encouraged Luke and pointed out that his title as the village head was just as cool as the others. Luke felt a little conflicted after being bombarded with compliments. The ratio of women to men in their village was roughly 2 to 1, and most of those who were married had their husbands forcibly conscripted. Seeing how their village was becoming more lively, Berlit was grateful and thanked Luke for everything. Luke's attention was yet again called as he was informed that more refugees were coming. Noticing that the refugees looked terrified, Luke asked what had happened to them. A refugee revealed that they were attacked by a gang of thieves. They were able to escape, but the few who resisted were killed, and a large number of them were dragged off somewhere. Selin understood that what had happened to them was awful. However, since they arrived in the village, it meant that it would no longer be just their problem. Luke was confused when the refugees suddenly apologized, but upon learning that they may have led the thieves to the village, Luke froze as he did not know what to do. Bar, a member of a gang of thieves, was annoyed since he received an earful from his boss. Bar's main job was to abduct refugees and sell them to slave traders. Thanks to one of the recent wars, refugee numbers were up and made their business increase. Unfortunately for Bar, some of the refugees escaped because of the little mistake he made. While following the refugees' tracks, Bar was surprised, as he did not remember a village posted on the barren land. Seeing that there were only women and children, Bar felt like he hit the jackpot. Bar was sure that the village was easy to take down since it was run by refugees. There was another reason why the gang was able to work fluidly, and that was all because of Bar's gift of telepathy. Bar then used his telepathy and called for a man named Satan. When Satan asked if Bar had found the escaped refugees, he shared that he did and revealed that he also found a village of refugees. As Bar glanced over the village, Luke felt something weird and was notified that an intruder was in their village. When Luke informed Selin that his ability alarmed him of an intruder, Selin became excited since Luke's new ability would be a big help in keeping their village safe. When Selin was informed of the intruder's location, she assumed that the gang was probably scouting the area since the village was new. Learning of their location, Selin noticed the chilling silence and realized that they were concealing their presence. When Selin asked Luke to stand back since they have no idea where their exact location was, she was a little dumbfounded as Luke pointed out the exact location. Surprised that his location was exposed, Bar tried escaping. However, when he noticed that only kids had spotted him, he tried attacking them. Unfortunately for Bar, he was immediately frozen by Selin. Bar only had been woken up by someone calling him out using his telepathy. As he was informed that the gang of thieves was about to head to the village, Bar became more confused with the place as it had a jail cell. When Selin asked Bar a question, Bar did not want to make more mistakes and lied to his colleagues that only children and women were at the village, which would be easy to take down. Out of nowhere, the old lady that Luke spoke to before asked them if she could handle Bar. After getting inside the cell, Selin warned the old lady not to get too close. After agreeing with Selin, the old lady asked Bar if he had a mother. When the old lady asked Bar to imagine her mother's face, Bar tried his best to hold his laughter and pretended to follow the old lady's request. When Selin warned the old lady not to be fooled by Bar's tears, they were surprised when the old lady suddenly killed Bar so hard in the groin. The old lady's demeanor changed as it was revealed that her name was Nima and her recommended job was a torturer. Nima then asked Bar to remember her mother's smile as she promised that once she was done with him, all Bar would ever think of was her mother's tear-stained face. As Nima's menacing laugh echoed throughout the jail cell, she suggested to Luke and Selin to prepare for battle while she continued to interrogate Bar. The gang of thieves that Bar was from finally arrived at Luke's village. A gang member sensed that something was off with Bar's responses as their conversation kept breaking off. Curious as to where Bar could be hiding, another member of the gang told him that Bar was just around slacking off. When the gang member suggested listening in on the village first before they started their raid, the gang boss told them that all they needed was brute force to make them yield and not overthink. Knowing that the village gate would not be enough to stop them, the gang boss charged right at the gate and destroyed it easily with one attack. As the boss instructed his men to follow him, Luke immediately sensed that the gang of thieves was already at the village. The thieves found it weird that no one was screaming even though they made so much noise. Thinking that Bar may have screwed up, all of them were surprised when they suddenly fell into a water moat. When they heard a cracking sound, the thieves later realized that the water was freezing. Seeing that they no longer could move, Luke and the others showed up as they couldn't believe they took everyone down without getting hurt. After giving her students the task of handling the thieves, Selin froze as she heard the gang boss's voice behind her. Fortunately for Selin, her reflexes were fast enough to block the gang boss's sneak attack. Underestimating Selin's prowess, the boss gang kept swinging his sword, making it difficult for Selin to fight back. Seeing the fight between Selin and the gang boss ensue, Luke noticed that the ice was melting and instructed the others to round up the thieves. Luke froze in fear as the thieves were already reaching out to his neck as all of the thieves had escaped from the water moat. As the thieves were about to reach Luke, Barlat was just in time to save and protect him from the thieves. While Luke was becoming dizzy from being held by Barlat, he noticed that his two villagers froze in fear. Luke realized that it was Perun and Lando's first real battle, and fighting the thieves would be their death. As the two froze in fear, they were then instructed to duck as Noel came right on time to save them. Satan was pleased after noticing that the villagers were now getting hysterical. Taking his eyes away from Barlat and Luke, Satan was knocked off by Luke's double kick. Luke then instructed everyone to push the thieves back into the moat since their bodies were still frozen. Luke's words increased the villagers' morale as they used every bit of strength they had to fight off and push the gang of thieves into the water moat. Perun and Lando, who were no longer afraid, focused themselves on pushing off the thieves. Seeing how the other gang members were being thrown into the water moat, Satan thought of it as crazy and couldn't believe what was happening. Satan realized that the two were novices, but they were now strong enough to push the experienced thieves. When Satan noticed his boss's weapon being dropped, he was shocked to find out that their boss was already so worn down. Selin revealed that she had cut and frozen the boss little by little until he finally could not move. Selin complimented the gang boss's strength. However, he was not smart enough to notice that he was slowly being injured. Unable to believe that they were defeated by the village, Satan could look down in defeat as they were all captured. The next day, after obtaining information from the thieves about the people they abducted, Luke and everyone else launched a rescue mission and saved them. It was a stroke of miracle that Luke and the others found them before they were sold off. It was all thanks to Nima's torturing skill that they were able to obtain vital information. They now only have one problem to deal with, and that was the captured thieves. Luke was sure that the thieves wreaked havoc on the lives of so many before them. Normally, Luke would hand them over to a nearby domain with proper laws and policies. However, considering the time and the recent influx of refugees, Luke does not think that any domain has the wherewithal to accept the thieves. Wondering what his next move was, a notification suddenly showed up in front of Luke asking him if he wishes to turn the thieves into villagers. Knowing that the option would be too risky, Luke noticed that there was a rehab option. Luke then opened the notification and found after building a jail cell, another perk showed up which could make criminals and miscreants reform. Villager was just a title Luke's gift can assign, and that doesn't mean that they would have to treat the thieves the same way. Luke planned to make the thieves as villagers, and then use the assess villager to check their loyalty on their reform status. Luke knew that if he kicked them out, the thieves would end up doing more damage to other people again. Wanting to know the others' opinions about his plan, the villagers were dissatisfied with the plan, as they could not forget how they were harmed, and the thought of being harmed by them. Berlit and Donga wanted to take things into consideration for the future crimes that may be committed in the village, planning to put the thieves in the rehabilitation center first and move forward after they got out. A villager was shivering knowing that he would not meet justice for his family that was killed. After their talk, a few people left the village. As the number of villagers went down, Luke noticed that once a villager with low loyalty was away for a certain amount of time, they would be automatically removed as villagers. Nima shared that even though she feels for those who've lost friends or family, it could not be helped if they do not align with the direction of the village. Nima pointed out that their village was peaceful and everyone was cooperative. Others were not used to seeing so much chaos. Nima's character suddenly changed as she warned Luke that the villagers would one day forget the good things Luke did for them and would absolutely go wild. It was of human nature. Nima was quite fond of dealing with criminals and miscreants. Nima advised Luke to not hesitate and push forward. Agreeing with Nima, Luke stepped in front of the cell and allowed the thieves to become villagers. Luke's decisions have exceeded 300 villagers, which made his village now level 5. When the rehabilitation center was built, Luke and the others tried to be optimistic as they didn't know how effective the center would be. To test the waters, Luke decided to put 5 obedient-looking thieves first. It was decided that Nima would be the one to look after those who were in the rehabilitation center. Luke only hoped that their plan would solve their thief problem. Seeing the thieves with their puppy dog eyes, Luke thought that they had already learned their lesson. But the second Luke saw their loyalty status, he immediately asked Nima to take them away. Next on Luke's task list was fixing the gate that the thieves broke. Planning on upgrading the gate so that it won't get easily destroyed next time, Luke wondered what other new stuff was available now that he had reached level 5. Luke received the ability called Facility Customization. This allows Luke to remodel facilities by spending village points. Luke planned to add roads and waterways in the village, though they do not cost many points. Luke still needed to make sure to use his points wisely. Overseeing his entire village, Luke was pretty pleased at how it all came together, since the water moat Luke built to take care of the thieves had gone back to normal. Wondering what to build next, Luke gathered everyone and announced that he had built a public bath where everyone can bathe. After informing the villagers of what to know about the bathhouse, the people were now eager to try it. After placing their clothes on the rack and testing the water, the men found it very pleasing. Luke then asked the ladies their opinion about the bath, which they enjoyed very much. Pleased that everyone liked the bathhouse, Luke's smile slowly turned to worry as the bathhouse became chaotic. While Luke went towards the training area and talked to the other villagers, Selen immediately noticed him and subconsciously whacked Barlot's sword away. While Selen asked about the status of the bathhouse, they suddenly heard a shout somewhere. Noticing that the sword was destroyed, Selen apologized as it was the last training sword they had. They then informed that they were only 2 of them who had real swords, and other than that, they pretty much do not have any weapons. They also tried bringing back some things they thought that were useful from their hunts, but there's not much they could find in the wasteland. The others tried to be very careful during training, but during actual combat, they knew they couldn't be very careful. When they proposed the idea of going much further in their next hunt, Luke was worried and asked if they had weapons to protect them. While the others brainstormed how they would obtain weapons to protect themselves, Luke was a little disappointed since all he could build were just facilities. While Barlot lectured his colleagues, he noticed Luke's worried expression and reassured him that since they will be safe as they've been to the forest plenty of times. Barlot suggested that Luke use the gift for himself more since he had already given so much. Gort agreed with Barlot and advised Luke to be more bold and selfish for once. He then pointed out that as the head of the village, Luke should at least live in a bigger house as huge as the bathhouse he had built. Selen was very pleased with Gort's suggestion since she was also sleeping in that same house. Tior, Perun, and Lando called Gort's attention as steam was still coming off of them. The 3 then spread false stories of Luke and the accidental things he had noticed living with Melia and Selen. Annoyed at how the 3 accused Luke of being a pervert, Luke immediately used 50 of his village points and upgraded his home to a medium house. While Selen and Melia sobbed over the changes made in the house, Luke, on the other hand, was very pleased, finding the process convenient, as the upgraded version of his house was exactly what he had envisioned. Melia noticed Luke's bed was much larger and pointed out to him that it was fitting for the village head. She expressed her wish to sleep in the same bed with Luke, as she couldn't sleep well on a bed she wasn't used to. When Melia decided to sleep with Luke, Selen protested. Despite their protests, Luke decided to give the bigger bed to Selen and Melia, being content with just a single bed. After demonstrating his ability to adjust the size of the bed, Selen and Melia felt defeated and cried out. While observing the stone walls, Luke had a good idea to add stairs behind the stone wall to make it easier for them to defend. After adding 8 sets of stairs, Luke had another idea and opened up holes in the wall to create embrasures. When Luke tested it, he peeked out of the hole he had made and realized the wall was thicker than he thought. Luke understood that the only weapon they could use was a spear or something long. He was surprised to see Donga's face on the other side of the wall. Curious about the purpose of the space, Luke explained that they could strike back from the open space if they were ever under attack. When Donga reached for Luke's hand and was reminded of the sandcastles he made as a kid, Luke realized it might be easy to reach them from the outside. Luke knew he had to address the lack of weapons, as he couldn't rely solely on Selen and her ice magic. He understood the sad reality that he wouldn't find the resources he needed in the wasteland. Luke then realized he could use his facility customization skill to alter parts of the wall. Luke manipulated the wood from the hut and made a wooden sword. However, he was surprised when the wooden sword suddenly broke. Luke noticed how fragile the wooden sword was and realized he couldn't make a sturdy weapon from just wood. Wondering what material he could use to make a good sword, Luke remembered there was iron in the jail cells. Visiting the jail, Luke was nervous as he was taunted by the thieves inside. Noticing that the iron bars did not budge no matter how the criminals kicked them, Luke walked towards the cell and realized the criminals would escape if he tried to get one of the bars. The criminal was surprised when another iron bar suddenly showed up in front of him. The thieves focused on observing Luke as he customized the size and length of the iron bar. After successfully creating a sword from the iron bar, Luke became more excited about what type of material he could use for the sword's hilt. The criminals were left in awe after witnessing Luke's skills. Barlat and Selen were surprised when Luke told them he had made an iron sword. After explaining how he used his skill to customize materials and make items from existing facilities, Selen was still confused about how Luke was able to make a sword from just his gift. When Selen gave Barlat the sword, the two sparred and tested the sword. Selen complimented Luke's new creation, stating it was perfect, and immediately bragged about it to the others. When Nima met with Luke, she reported that the first batch of thieves had been successfully reformed and were ready to go. Luke's eyes glowed as he saw that the loyalty status of the 5 criminals' village was high. As Luke found himself surrounded by the newly reformed criminals, Nima made it clear to them that their new leader was Luke and that they would do whatever he asked. Seeing how easily Nima controlled the former thieves, Luke was amazed, as the criminals now looked like completely different people. Surprised at how obedient the former thieves were, Luke asked Nima what tactics she used to make the thieves become more compliant. Nima initially wanted to instill fear in the criminals' hearts. However, she noticed that as soon as they were placed in the rehabilitation center, they immediately became docile. Requesting more criminals with greater audacity, she left Luke surrounded by his new obedient villagers. Luke still had doubts about the reformed criminals, but he couldn't ignore the fact that their loyalty was high and that Nima personally vouched for them. Wondering if the former thieves had truly been rehabilitated, Luke glanced at Barlat and instructed the thieves to help Barlat out. Nima continued to rehabilitate the thieves, while the hunters kept an eye out for those who had left the facility. Even though they were still suspicious, they could not ignore the changes in their personalities. Seeing how excited Nima was with her work, Luke was pleased that everything had gone well. All of a sudden, Luke heard a voice out of nowhere. He was then informed of the identity that kept calling him. Luke remembered that there was a member of the thieves who had the gift of telepathy. The thief introduced himself as Satan, a former member of a well-known merchant family. Unfortunately for Satan, he was kicked out and became a thief just to survive. As Satan confessed the sins he had committed before, he tried begging Luke to set him free, as he would atone for his crimes. However, Luke was not easily swayed, as he could still tell that Satan was still mutinous. Satan couldn't believe how sharp Luke was, but continued to pretend that he had learned his lesson. Satan focused on himself and tried to find information that would point to Luke and everyone's weak spots. When Melia came into the facility, Satan was appalled after hearing Melia's thoughts. Melia was confused when she was suddenly accused of being a nasty woman. But when Nima told Melia of Satan's gift, she immediately became nervous and asked Luke to have Satan be rehabilitated immediately. As Satan was being dragged by Nima into the rehabilitation center, Melia flinched when Luke suddenly asked her what she was thinking about. Curious as to why Satan looked awfully shocked, Melia lied and told Luke that she was thinking about cleaning the toilets later. Walking across the village, Luke felt something was off and asked Berlit and the others what was happening. Luke became nervous after learning that Selen and their hunting team had not yet returned. After hearing that the hunting party had not yet arrived, a little girl told Berlit and Luke that it was because of the curse of Almiraj. Confused, Luke asked what the little girl meant. The little girl explained that the Almiraj is a type of giant, aggressive rabbit that could grow to be over 1 meter large with a sharp horn on its head. On a good day, their hunters brought back a couple of Almiraj, as it had useful materials aside from being tender food. When the little girl showed them the Almiraj balls, she explained that they were much bigger than normal. The hunters came back with an Almiraj like they always do. However, the little girl felt scared seeing the Almiraj staring at the balls she was holding on. When the little girl wanted to check it out more closely, she was surprised that the dead Almiraj that the hunters brought suddenly let out an awful screech. When Berlit threw out a couple of theories about what may have happened, the little girl threw the balls at Luke and Berlit as she insisted that the balls were cursed. Berlit shared that some animals and creatures could emit their pheromones a few miles just to attract mates. Guessing that the hunters helped in butchering the Almiraj, Berlit assumed that the scent would also be on the hunting party. Even if the hunting party had gifts, they would still be overpowered by a pack of Almiraj. Sensing the danger, Luke was about to instruct Berlit to send out help, but his attention was diverted when someone from the watchtower alerted them to something unknown. When Luke and Berlit ran up towards the walls, they realized that it wasn't just the hunters who were in danger. They might be as well. Curious as to what the mysterious thing was, the little girl wanted to hand out the balls as some sort of offering. Realizing that he was the only skilled fighter currently available, Luke instructed Berlit to get everyone to safety as he would buy them some time. While others suggested using the thieves for protection, Selin heard the commotion and asked everyone what was happening. Luke and the others were surprised to see Selin, worrying that harm had befallen them. When they mentioned the creature seen outside the village, Selin explained they had just hunted a couple of orcs. Orcs are ill-tempered creatures capable of laying waste to a village by themselves. For that reason, orc meat is rare and considered by many to be a luxury food item. Surprised that they had even caught 2 orcs, Perun and Lando immediately asked Milia how long they had to wait to taste the orcs. Milia and the others responded that they would prepare it right away. As Milia and the others carved and butchered the dead orcs, Luke could not bear to look at how they prepared the meat. Impressed at how skilled their work was, it felt like being on a battlefield. After the food was finally cooked and prepared, Perrin and the others were surprised at how appetizing the orc meat looked. When they finally tasted the orc meat, they couldn't help but roll on the floor as it was so delicious. When Perrin and Lando fed Luke with the cooked orc meat, he was surprised since it was so savory and chewy. Selin explained that the reason why the orc meat was delicious was because it was still fresh. Orcs are only found deep in the woods or remote regions. The meat is then cut into manageable pieces and transported on a horse-drawn carriage. The journey takes a few days, and by the time they eat it, all that travel time affects the flavor of the meat. Sadly, Kellen's explanation was ignored as everyone was already busy eating the orc meat. Noticing the little girl's disappointed look, Luke asked Berlit what was wrong. The little girl was disappointed that the curse of the balls was not correct. After hearing the little girl, Milia offered the little girl the orcish ball broil. Luke was surprised and ended up spitting out his food. When Luke asked Milia why she served that food to the little girl, Milia explained that the food is good for stamina and has a chock full of nutrients. Berlit shared that he had one before with a bull or a horse, but was surprised at how someone was able to make that type of food using an orc. When the little girl tried tasting it, Berlit and Luke were uncomfortable at how she kept describing the food in a lewd manner. Half a year had passed since Luke created the village. Luke then noticed that the air had gotten a bit cold, to which the villagers responded that they should start preparing themselves for winter. Luke's attention was called by Berlit and the others. They then shared their wish to take a trip back to their homes as they were concerned about their parents. Seeing that they have plenty of rooms, Luke suggested to Berlit that they bring their parents into the village. However, Berlit was not sure if their parents would want to go on a long journey. Barlat and Selin joined in the conversation and offered to guard them during their trip. They suddenly turned quiet when the reformed thieves offered to help on their journey. Even though the reformed thieves offered to sacrifice themselves for everyone's safety, Luke was still hesitant to let them leave the village. Selin favored having the thieves come along as they may need more muscle, and if they ever betray them, she would beat them mercilessly. Luke eventually agreed, though he still had doubts about the thieves. Donga and the others understood Luke's feelings since they themselves still get scared every time they see the reformed thieves. A few days had passed since the others left for their journey. Luke had an idea. After repositioning the fields and adding some row houses, he finally created living space for the reformed thieves. To help everyone feel more at ease, Luke thought they could assist with the fields and defend the village. When the reformed thieves saw their new home, they were very grateful for how considerate Luke was. As Satan promised to handle any danger for the village, he gained a good reputation with his telepathy. Tior, impressed by Satan's gift, asked him why he became a thief. Luke also remembered that Satan had told him before that he was forced out of a merchant family. Satan shared that others didn't think his gift was handy but rather deemed it troublesome, as he would be able to hear everyone's thoughts. When the priest gave Satan his gift, he immediately became nervous, worried that his thoughts could be heard. For Satan, hearing everyone's thoughts was hell. He found that the priest, who was supposed to be a beacon of ethics and virtue, was secretly beating his wife every night. There was also a girl who everyone thought was a saint but was in fact preying on the needy. Satan was surprised after hearing his parents' worries and that they were planning to get rid of him. He decided to run away when he later met his boss and his gang of thieves. Tior then lectured Satan about the wrong things they had done, after which he tasked Satan to do more chores to atone for their sins. Satan willingly accepted the task and was about to head off when he was surprised to hear Milia's thoughts and ended up collapsing. Milia informed Luke of the good news that Berlit and the others had returned from their trip. As the older people met with Luke and their loved ones, some were surprised that Nima, who has a talent for torture, had a husband. Seeing the older villagers safe and sound, Luke hoped that those who were conscripted were safe as well. Luke then noticed that the other men were wearing clothes that seemed familiar. Selin explained that the men were thieves who had attacked them, and they later found out that they were leftovers from the gang they caught. The thieves were surprised when a reformed thief suddenly approached them, hinting that they would soon also change. At the same time, a few miles away, two men were walking in the wastelands, hoping to find a Lord's son in the wilderness. The two men were father and son who had accepted the task of finding the son of a lord, as they could no longer survive in their village. As they were walking, the father became enraged as he kept sharing his regrets of not being born into a wealthier family. The son then noticed something in the far distance, which made the father even angrier for thinking that his son was trying to change the topic. After describing to his father the stone walls he was seeing, the son excitedly ran towards the village. Later that night, the people were celebrating the reunion of their families and friends. Luke, who was observing them from his home, was very pleased seeing how happy everyone was. When he finally felt very tired, Luke told Melia and Selene that he was going to sleep. As Luke was sleeping peacefully, Selene and Melia suddenly appeared and squeezed their way into Luke's bed. Though the two slept peacefully, Luke, on the other hand, was becoming uncomfortable. Luke was surprised when he suddenly received a telepathic report from Satan, informing him of two men approaching the village. Luke then met with the two men, and they introduced themselves as Mac, the chief of the village named Mao, and his son Manta. When Luke introduced himself, Mac asked if he was the son of Lord Albert. Surprised, Luke asked if Mac knew about him. Mac shared that he had heard of Lord Albert ordering his son to cultivate a vast wasteland, but was surprised after seeing the structures and crops in the village. When Luke mentioned that he had built everything for over half a year, the two doubted it, and wondered if Lord Albert had built it for Luke. When Luke asked for the reason why the two came to his village, Mac then explained that since another big war was coming, they were looking for a place to earn some money during the winter. Their faces immediately glowed with happiness as Luke offered them to stay at his village. Thinking of the upcoming war, Luke guessed that the House Albert must be fighting against the House Schoneger, since the two houses make up two of the great powers, and the other neighbors were not exactly on good terms. Luke wondered if Raoul would be joining in the fight. When Mac showed his gratitude to Luke, Manta whispered to him, pointing out that he was being too honest. Luke wondered what he would be doing if the roles were to be changed, and he received the gift of holy swordsmanship. Luke wondered if he would notice all the sufferings around him. Back then, Luke was so eager to live up to expectations, but now he could only think of it as stupid. Mac then decided to tell everyone about Luke's village since they now have permission to live in the village. A couple of days later, Luke greeted the villagers of Mao and welcomed them to his village. Seeing the crops in the village, Manta assumed that the rumors of Luke having a junk gift were false. Luke made the rumors become facts for Manta, as he indeed did not receive the gift of holy swordsmanship and was ordered to cultivate a wasteland. After explaining to everyone that he instead received the gift of village building, which helped him a lot in managing the village, everyone was then notified that the hunters were back. The Mao villagers were surprised to see the hunters carrying 5 almiraj. Seeing the Mao villagers, Selin boasted of having more food for the winter, and suggested that they have a feast for them. Luke was curious why Selin was boasting, but was surprised when they revealed that they had caught a great boar. Everyone from the Mao village was in shock since the hunters had brought back a more dangerous monster. When Luke asked how they were able to take the great boar down, Selin explained that Noel and Gort stopped the boar using their shields, which then gave her the opportunity to end the boar's life. Mac had to pinch Manta's face just to check if they were dreaming, as the villagers were dragging the dead great boar. Luke realized that the villagers of Mao may be tired from the trip, and he suggested that they can sit and relax for the time being. When Mac asked if they could take a spot for them to set up their tents, Luke forgot to set up a home for them and used his gift to create more row houses. Mac and Manta were in total disbelief after seeing the houses showing up out of nowhere. Luke reminded them that his gift was village building, which helps him make plenty of useful things. Mac and Manta, who were in shock, were amazed at how super useful Luke's gift was. As Luke received congratulations for surpassing 1,000 villagers and reaching level 6, he felt a bit overwhelmed by how many people were now in the village. Since then, 92 people from Mao have joined their village. But the influx of new people did not initially stop Luke from accepting those in need. Slowly, people stayed in his village just to exploit his good-willed nature. The reformed thieves routinely patrolled the wasteland areas to ensure people could traverse it safely, which Luke guessed was the cause of the sudden increase in people visiting the village. Luke and the others had a meeting regarding the increase in their population as they theorized that they would soon be a target for war. Selin and Melia were enthused about preparing themselves and granting powers to those who had hidden gifts. Luke rounded up all the villagers and told them that some of them may have gifts. After assessing everyone, Luke found that about 100 of the villagers had the potential for gifts. Luke was surprised upon discovering a variety of gifts, and 24 of those who had gifts were related to fighting. Excluding the children and the elderly, it left them with a total of 19 people. As the two new villagers celebrated that they may not need to work anymore since there were many people with gifts, Berlit gave them a stern and friendly reminder that they would still have to work regardless of whether they had gifts or not. Luke knew that community-wide support was essential in making the most out of everyone's gifts. Since there weren't many kinds of jobs in their village just yet, Luke knew that they couldn't just give everyone the one they recommended. However, Luke was able to help them with similar jobs, fostering a sense of community. Luke's remaining concern was that some villagers had a low status in village loyalty. Those with low loyalty would most likely leave the village. While observing one of the low-loyalty villagers, he was a bit confused since the man was getting along with everyone. But suddenly, a group of women rounded up the man asking who the woman he was talking to was. Everyone was then silenced when another woman showed up carrying a baby and informed them that the man was married. Low village loyalty leads to low village morale and creates all sorts of extra issues for Luke and the village, which they eventually decide to take a few of those matters into their own hands. Fortunately, some of those concerns could be resolved by asking them about their problems, which helped Luke nip some issues in the bud. Exhausted from helping each individual in the village, Berlit tried encouraging Luke that the village would soon come together. While trying to fix things, Luke did not realize that they had managed to surpass the 1,000-village mark and ended up gaining new types of facilities. Seeing a familiar facility, Luke recalled that apartments were quite normal in his past life. After reading through the amenities offered by the apartment complex, Luke eventually decided to make one since it had more value than the row house. Luke has not changed the areas enclosed by the stone wall, but with each level, their village area has increased to almost the entire wasteland. While thinking of making new facilities outside the stone walls, Luke noticed that Nima was exhausted as she passed by him. When Luke asked what the problem was, Nima shared that she was having a hard time rehabilitating two thieves. One was the boss named Doriel, as everything Nima did had no effect on him. Nima could only guess that Doriel may have had many life-threatening experiences that gave him more confidence and strength. Nima then shared the real problem of the two, which was Bar. Seeing the kids that had helped in capturing him, Bar then taunted Nima and told her that he would never change no matter what. Bar's insults only enraged Nima as he received more beatings from her. Luke then noticed a weird sound and wondered if it came from Bar. As Nima kept on beating Bar, she eventually got annoyed. As it turned out, Bar was a masochist and loved the beatings he received from Nima. Luke and the others finally realized why Nima was having a hard time changing Bar. He was a masochist who enjoyed pain and humiliation. Understanding that causing pain to Bar could actually help them, Selen realized they could use it as an incentive to control him. Knocking and stomping on Bar, Selen tried to assert dominance by promising a reward if he listened well. However, Selen's tactics failed, as Bar would just end up spitting on her face. Nima explained that masochists may seem obedient, but they're by no means submissive. If one is not prepared to accept the proclivities of another, it is best to keep a distance. Luke and the others had no choice but to put the rehabilitation on hold for the time being. Annoyed at what just happened, Selen's attention was caught by Doriel, asking her if she was Bajrata's Iceblade princess. After questioning Selen about her presence in the wastelands, Doriel shared that he had no intentions of following someone weaker than him. Selen guessed that Doriel wished to be released as he would turn over a new leaf. However, Doriel made it clear that he only shows respect to those who have bested him, and that if Selen ever needed his help, he would answer her call. After informing everyone of what Doriel had said to her, Selen expressed the idea of having Doriel as an ally since they would gain a strong asset. Selen clarified to everyone that she does not fully trust Doriel yet, but if something were to happen, she thought they could use him as their last resort. Noticing that Bar and Doriel's status changed from mutinous to low, Luke thought Selen might have a point. Luke and the others noticed that the public bath had been crowded lately. Selen explained that since the weather had gotten a little colder, people were now craving a warm bath. Luke was happy that everyone enjoyed the bath he made, though he wished that he could make other types of baths. Luke then had an idea to use the facility customization to make the perfect bath for winter. After successfully upgrading his house and adding a bath in the garden, Berlit and the others were surprised and amazed by Luke's new home. As Luke was glad to welcome guests into his home, Melia and Selen, on the other hand, were now saddened as many people would spend more time with Luke. As Perrin shared his opinion about the open bath, Luke tried explaining the benefits of having an open bath outside. Annoyed by their side comments, Luke ended up pushing them into his bath so that they could experience it for themselves. As Perun and the others found the bath relaxing, they asked if Luke was not going to take a bath. Luke smiled as he wanted everyone to enjoy the bath first. Luke smiled as he finally got the chance to have some time for himself without Melia or Selen around to bug him. As he washed himself and relaxed at the open bath, Luke could still faintly hear people's voices, even though it was already late. Realizing that his lonely days may be over, Luke was suddenly surprised by Milia as she sneaked behind him and offered to wash his back. Years had passed since Luke was ordered to develop the barren land. Milia and Luke had overcome many tribulations and built a village overflowing with love, a real picture-perfect fairy tale. Unfortunately for Milia, her fairy tale was immediately ruined as soon as they built the village, with an influx of meddlers and villagers coming to live with them. As the village grew, so did Milia and Luke's time together. Milia felt that something must be done, as she no longer knew her purpose if she left Luke alone. To fill the lonely void in his heart, Milia was willing to offer her touch. Salivating behind Luke, Milia told herself that she was not doing it for her self-satisfaction but for Luke's sake. Selin immediately karate-chopped Milia's arm as she noticed that Milia was sneaking up behind Luke. As the two grabbed each other's faces and arms, they ended up arguing and making a scene in the bath. Luke wanted to peacefully stop the two, but they ignored him. Having had enough of Milia and Selin, Luke became mad and warned them that there would be no fooling around in the bath. Shocked by Luke's anger, the two evidently knelt, feeling remorse. In the northern region of the Albert domain, Governor Dantho received a report that people from another village had completely vanished. Governor Dantho was surprised that villagers had vanished again. He expected that a few would leave because of the new tax increase, but did not expect a whole village. The governor was curious if the villagers knew the hardships that awaited them outside of their region. The governor was then informed that the men who investigated the missing villagers heard a bizarre rumor. Governor Dantho became curious and asked what rumor it was. The knight mentioned that there was talk of a new village in the northern reaches that promises people safety, comfort, and even plenty of food to eat. Hearing the rumor, Governor Dantho thought of it as an obvious trap as he remembered the area not being in conditions to be livable. Concerned that many people would attempt to journey to the said village, Governor Dantho gave an order to investigate the area, and if needed, he would personally go along with the investigation. Surprised that the governor himself would come along, Governor Dantho explained that it was a point of concern for him since the rumored area was the place where Lord Albert ordered his son, Master Luke, to develop. While having some snacks, Luke received a telepathic report that a suspicious group was observing them. Wondering if it were more immigrants, Satan mentioned that the group seemed more like scouts since they're awfully calm. Selin noticed Luke's worried look, which prompted her to ask what was wrong. Luke announced that a suspicious group was spying on the village, which alarmed the villagers if the group that was spying on them were foes. Knowing how strong the villagers had become, Luke asked them not to let the spies start a fight with them so easily. Selin agreed with Luke as she gained strength from Luke's words. A few days later, Governor Dantho, along with his guard, was in total shock after seeing stone walls out in the wasteland. The governor thought that it would be just a small village, but after seeing it personally, he pretty much could call the village a city. When one of the reformed thieves asked Governor Dantho what they were doing in their village, Governor Dantho introduced himself as the governor of Northie in the northern region, and wished to speak with their village head. After opening the gates, Governor Dantho immediately assumed that it was some sort of trap. The governor's knight reassured him that he would be safe as his elite force was by his side. After entering the village, Governor Dantho was surprised to see vast crops behind the walls. The governor was even more surprised after seeing wheat as he had never seen one grow at that time of year. Noticing the two-tiered stone walls, the governor knows that the village would need a substantial amount of capital and labor to build everything. The governor also noticed how healthy the villagers were, which he finally accepted that the village indeed was a paradise. When Governor Dantho was greeted by Luke as he introduced himself as the head of the village, he immediately recognized Luke, the son of Lord Albert, even though he had only met him once long ago. As Governor Dantho introduced himself, his voice was overshadowed by his knight, as he was surprised to see a great boar behind Luke. The elite force of Governor Dantho wondered if the bones of the great boar were just picked up somewhere. However, their curiosity was immediately answered as a villager said out loud that the great boar they hunted was delicious. Perun and the others couldn't help but reminisce about how tasty the great boar was, while Berlit thought that the bones were doing more harm than good to Luke's overall presence. As Luke remembered, there were more than 20 governors in the Albert domain. Land taken through war was usually put under the governance of those most loyal to the Alberts. However, if the existing governor bends the knee and pledges their loyalty to the domain, they are, in some cases, allowed to continue serving. When Governor Dantho apologized for greeting Luke quite late, Luke guessed that Governor Dantho didn't even know that Luke had been banished. Since Governor Dantho's region was close by, Luke suspected that they would be interacting with the governor a lot in the foreseeable future. Luke wanted to make sure they stay on friendly terms, so he prepared a welcoming feast in honor of the people of Northie. Walking through the village, Governor Dantho became curious about the structures, to which Luke explained the housing complex where their villagers live. The governor noticed that even though they have a large population, no trace of human waste is seen. Luke mentioned that they do their best to keep things clean and hygienic. When the governor asked about another unique structure, Luke explained that it was the public bath. Luke shared that each home had its own bath, but the villagers seemed to enjoy taking a dip in their spacious public bath. Governor Dantho's curiosity had reached its limits and asked Luke how he was able to make so much progress on the wastelands in such a short period. Luke shared with the governor that he had built everything with his village gift. After explaining to the governor Luke's gift and what had happened, Governor Dantho realized why Luke was sent out to the wastelands. Luke revealed to the governor that he only became aware of his ability after he was sent to the wastelands. Even Lord Albert doesn't know about Luke's gift's true powers. Luke knew that if the governor would tell his father about the village, it would cause an uproar. Understanding behind Luke's words, Governor Dantho accepted his explanation. Governor Dantho and his elite force were then served with plenty of vegetables and meat. Some were even surprised that the meat they were eating came from an orc. Melia then introduced Perun and the others for their entertainment as they would portray their swordsmanship. Luke and the governor were surprised as Perun and Barlat were really fighting each other seriously. Luke didn't want to bring up anything related to the church, but that option was no longer possible since the villagers had displayed their magical gifts. After being shocked at what they witnessed, Luke guided the governor to the place where he can temporarily stay. When Governor Dantho asked for his knight's opinion of the village, the knight found everything as an understatement and apologized to the governor. Seeing the governor's confused look, the knight explained that he had promised that they would protect him. However, after witnessing the talents the villagers had, the knight doubted that the elite forces could take everyone on. The governor did not expect that the village would have so many gift wielders. Seeing the church outside, Governor Dantho wondered where Luke found the priest. Knowing what the church claims the gifts were, Governor Dantho knows that if the church knew about the village, then they would likely take action. When the knight asked the governor how he would explain the village to the lord of the domain, the knight was surprised when the governor responded that he just wouldn't. The governor knew that the moment he would report it to the lord, Raoul would hear the situation first. Seeing the village as a threat to his position, Governor Dantho also knew that Raoul would not hesitate to destroy the village. The knight reminded the governor that if someone found out he was keeping the secret, he would most likely lose his life. Governor Dantho has always done what he was told, turning a blind eye to the suffering of his people and enforcing strict taxes which he threatened them with violence. As Governor Dantho shared how he would put his faith in the brighter future displayed in the village, none of them knew that Satane was listening to their conversation and telepathically reported it to Luke. Selin felt relieved after hearing the report, as she was ready to take matters into her own hands if the conversation suddenly changed for the worst. As morning arrived, Luke greeted Governor Dantho and asked if he had slept well. Governor Dantho responded that he had slept well. He then mentioned that he forgot to thank Luke for accepting migrants from Northie as he was so stunned yesterday. Governor Dantho was deeply ashamed since his citizens had suffered due to his inaction. The governor asked Luke if he could sell them some food since Northie had been going through a great famine, and the citizens no longer had the resources or food. Hearing Governor Dantho's problem, Luke gladly accepted his request. Unfortunately, the governor also mentioned that they were currently short on money and were hoping that Luke would accept supplies as payment. Luke did not mind and rather liked the idea since their village was still new, and there were still many things they lacked. Governor Dantho was very grateful towards Luke. As a token of appreciation, the governor planned to dispatch their trustworthy merchant guild. The guild had multiple branches across Northie, and dealing directly with them would make trade smoother than going through the public office. As Governor Dantho and his elite force left the village, Luke thought that he should create a road that carriages could pass. Luke's action surprised the people of Northie as a paved road suddenly appeared beneath their feet. A few days later, news of the hunting party returned. However, Luke was surprised when he did not see Selin and the others. Barlat explained that the others were still in the forest, and that they only returned to give Luke an update. Barlat reported that they happened to find some injured elves. The others are escorting them back to their village before making their way home. Luke and the others were surprised by just the word elves being uttered. Teor then fantasized about elven women as he heard some rumors that they are stunning. Hearing Teor, Berlit lectured him that the elves have been abused for their beauty, which was the reason they avoid humans. Luke then asked Barlat to give him full detail of what had happened. Barlat shared that they were just hunting as usual when they suddenly heard yelling coming from inside the forest. As they made their way towards the noise cautiously, Selin and the others found elves fighting for their lives against mad grizzlies. Barlat and the others then joined the elves and managed to take the mad grizzlies down. Since many of the elves were severely injured, the hunting party decided to escort them back to their village. Barlat informed Luke that Selin and the others are currently at the elven village and that they will most likely return the morning after. Glad that everyone was safe, Luke and the others wondered what the elven village looked like. When Selin and the others had returned, elves were with them. As the elves greeted Luke, everyone was mesmerized at their beauty, which they then received a warning from Selin. The representative of the elves introduced herself as Philianus Mel Labol Leoninus Selinarius, so that it would be easy for others. She suggested calling her Philia. Philia visited the village in place of their chief to express their gratitude. Luke was somewhat pleased that Selin was at least able to break the ice. Philia still could not believe that a village was constructed in the wastelands, as she had thought that nothing would ever grow on barren lands. When Luke offered to show Philia around the village, Teor suggested that they show the bath first. Teor's request drew some negative reaction from the others at first, but after smelling the strong odor of one of the elves, they were now having second thoughts. Selin pushed with the bath idea, which everyone eventually agreed. As Philia removed her weapons, some elves showed concern as they would be open to an attack. Philia reassured the other elves that everyone in the village would not harm them. If they did, then they would not be breathing at the moment. While Luke asked Kellen to guide the elves to their designated baths, Philia was so excited that she ended up taking her clothes in front of Luke and immediately headed towards the men's bath. When Philia opened the door and saw Donga, there was silence for a couple of seconds before Donga realized that he was staring at a woman. After hearing Donga's scream, a couple of men ran towards the room and were surprised to see an elf. Selin and the others had to take control of the situation since the bathhouse was becoming rowdy. Nima ended up hearing the commotion and menacingly asked if she should give everyone a good spanking. As the commotion died down, they then instead used Luke's open bath. As Philia finally experienced the lukewarm water of the hot spring, she was very much intrigued since she no longer had to worry about the cold or about monsters. Philia and the others enjoyed the bath so much that they soaked for almost an hour. Philia, still warm from overstaying in the bath, expressed her gratitude once again for the kind treatment they received after receiving help. Philia shared that they had underestimated the power of a mad grizzly and were lucky that Selin and the others came to save them. As a token of gratitude, Philia gave Luke a gift. When Melia and Clem saw the gift, they immediately recognized it as a box full of potions. Luke and the others had mixed reactions upon receiving the gift, complimenting the rare medicine. Philia boasted about their medicine passed down through generations, but mentioned that it couldn't bring back the lives lost. As Luke and Philia shook hands, a feast was held for the elves. Philia did not expect that they would also get to enjoy a meal. She then noticed her comrades' happy faces as they interacted with other people. Relieved to see the other elves lowering their guard, Philia asked Luke if she could use the comfort room. When Philia saw the toilet bowl for the first time, she was confused, feeling like she could just get inside it. Since Philia did not know how to use the toilet, she tried sitting on it, which resulted in her slipping. When everyone heard Philia's voice, they immediately ran to her aid. Before Philia could explain what had happened, the other elves already had their swords drawn for battle. After Philia explained what had happened, Luke explained to her that it was the bidet that spewed water at her. After learning the purpose of the bidet, Philia was intrigued and asked Luke how they were able to make one, as she wished to bring one to her village. Luke could not give a clear explanation since he also did not know. The bidet appeared when he created the toilet with his gift. After hearing Luke's explanation, Philia was a little disappointed that she could not take the invention to her village. As time went by, the elves finally decided to return to their village. Luke was about to send the elves off when he suddenly noticed that Philia was not with them. When the elves mentioned that Philia was going to use the toilet, Luke immediately wondered if Philia ate something bad since she had been in the toilet for some time. As Luke dashed towards the toilet to check on Philia, he ended up becoming confused as he saw Philia playing with the bidet. As Philia and the other elves finally left the village, Governor Dantho's tradesmen unexpectedly arrived at the village to trade for crops, clothes, and household goods. What Luke liked most in the trade was the livestock. The villagers were surprised that the tradesmen willingly traded their livestock for the village crops. Luke then created a livestock shed for the animals. Luke also assigned Nalul to take care of the livestock along with others, since her recommended job was that of a breeder. As Luke and Teor wished to drink milk and eat eggs, a cow immediately showed a displeased look. Nalul then explained that one of the cows had recently suffered a heartbreak and did not like Luke and Teor's comments. An elf found herself in a dire situation as she was pursued by an orc in the forest. Since the traders arrived and brought resources, the village experienced prosperity. The villagers were thrilled to use fresh eggs for making pancakes and to acquire new clothing. Luke was pleased with the new supplies they had received, as until now, they had to repurpose bed sheets and curtains for making clothes. While Melia and Selin were enthusiastic about the village's future, Luke received a telepathic report that an elf was approaching the village. When the elf finally entered the village, she immediately sought help. Selin asked her to calm down and explain what had happened, and the elf revealed that orcs had attacked their village. The elf explained that orcs became extremely aggressive when searching for food, and though the elves tried to fight back, they were outnumbered. The elves were instructed to abandon the village while others bought time for their escape. After receiving the instructions, the elf ran towards Luke's village as fast as she could. Luke then instructed Satan to inform all the elves that they could take refuge in his village and to update the villagers about the situation. Surprised by Luke's prompt response, the elf expressed her gratitude. After Luke's level of goodwill increased, the size of his territory also expanded. Luke planned to use his abilities to save the elves, but he was concerned about not knowing Philia and the others' whereabouts. Luke only hoped they were within the territory. As an orc was about to grab Philia, it was suddenly knocked away by a stone wall. Philia then heard Luke's voice and was told that they would be fighting with them. While Luke and the others guided the elves back to the village, Luke asked Philia to seek refuge as well. Apologizing for needing more help from Luke, Philia, Selen, and the others busied themselves preparing for the orcs. Luke and Selen's attention shifted to the watchtower as the villager posted there was surprised to see at least 30 orcs. With no other options, Selen and the others did everything they could to protect the village. Luke then instructed Philia to lead the orcs back to the village. Philia agreed but wondered if Luke and the others would be safe. As the walls created a path for Philia, it also became narrower. Seeing Luke at the end of the walls, Philia thought that Luke's plan was to fight the orcs one at a time. However, the moment Philia passed the walls using his customization ability, Luke squashed the orcs between the two walls. While the villagers were excited after successfully defeating the orcs, Philia was still in shock about what had happened. Amazed by Luke's abilities, Philia could only laugh. However, danger still loomed over the forest. Luke had finally defeated the remaining orcs and informed Philia that they were now safe. While tending to the wounds of those who were injured, Luke asked Philia if the orcs had always been aggressive around that specific season every year. Philia shared that they aren't hunted by orcs as they don't suit their tastes, but due to increases in their population, orcs have become less selective. After learning new information from Philia, Luke planned to take extra precautions when going hunting for the time being. Philia told Luke that the village might be in danger, since there were already so many gathered outside the village. Selen encouraged Philia that even though it was important to be wary of the situation, they also do not need to be so gloomy. Hearing Selen boast about her strength, Philia regained her courage, assuming that even if they get attacked by the Orc King, they would be just fine. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed throughout the wasteland. Curious about what creature may have produced that sound, Luke and the others were surprised when they saw a huge orc charging towards the village. While Selen and Philia were regretting what they had said about the Orc King, Luke immediately started planning on stopping the Orc King. However, the Orc King was so fast that when Luke tried to build a wall, it was easily destroyed. Luke was now wondering what he should do next since he used up most of his points from defeating the orcs earlier. As Luke had used up his remaining points, he could only close his eyes and wait for his impending end. Luke then heard a loud sound and was surprised to see Gort and Noel taking on the Orc King. Luke couldn't believe that Gort and Noel, who have gifts, were struggling against the Orc King. As the village was on the verge of being destroyed by the Orc King, Luke asked Satan for a favor. The combined forces of the elves and the villagers were still not enough to even damage the Orc King. Even with Selen's attacks, the Orc King still did not take serious damage due to its tough muscles. Perun and Lando tried sneaking an attack but were just swatted by the Orc King. Barlat had to step in just to save Lando. However, because of the Orc King's strength, Barlat could only evade the attacks. When Perun and Lando tried backing up Barlat, the two ended up being thrown off by the Orc King. As the villagers were gradually losing morale, a familiar voice asked them if they had gotten weak. Everyone was surprised, including Selen, as Doriel came to save them from the Orc King. Selen was surprised by Doriel's sudden appearance and asked what he was doing outside of jail. Doriel explained that Luke had used Satan's ability and called him out. He then reminded Selen that if they ever needed help, he would lend them a hand. Seeing Selen's confused look, Luke explained that they no longer had any options, and he decided to bet on Doriel. Commending Luke's decision, Doriel didn't expect that he would ever get a chance to fight an Orc King. When Doriel dashed towards the Orc King, he was almost swatted away as the Orc King tried to intimidate him. Selen and the others were worried that Doriel had taken the Orc King's attack head-on. As the area was covered with thick dust, Perun and Lando were shockingly disappointed when they could no longer see Doriel. Masked within the thick dust, Doriel launched a surprise attack and successfully landed a headbutt on the Orc King. Everyone was surprised as it was the first time they saw the Orc King stumble. Seeing the opportunity, Selen instructed everyone to immediately attack the Orc King while it was still regaining its senses. Though the others still couldn't believe that they were being saved by Doriel, they were somewhat grateful that Doriel had created an opportunity for them to attack. Everyone then took turns in trapping the Orc King and damaging it with a spear and sword. When Barlat landed another attack, Selen saw an opening and used her ice magic to slow down the Orc King's movement. When the Orc King was finally getting tired, Luke coincidentally received his daily additional points. After asking everyone to step away from the Orc King, Luke immediately used his points and created a cage using the stone walls, trapping the Orc King inside. Lando celebrated too early as he was surprised that the Orc King could still create powerful attacks inside the stone cage. Luke knew that trapping the Orc King wouldn't be enough, so using the facility upgrade to increase the strength of the walls, Luke planned to build a new facility on top of the stone cage, and then remove the ceiling. When Luke executed his plan perfectly, he then called the move facility Crush. Noticing that the orc had become quiet, Selen confirmed the Orc King's death after double-checking its body. The villagers celebrated as Luke and the others successfully defended the village against a strong monster. As Doriel wondered if they had completely defeated the Orc King, Luke called Doriel's attention and expressed his gratitude. However, Luke still considered what would happen to Doriel moving forward. An older elf approached Luke and asked if he was the chief of the village. The old elf then introduced himself as the chief of the elven village, Leoninus Mel Labol Rendelinus El Tibula. When Luke finally met the chief of the elven village, his first impression was that the chief's name was quite lengthy. Luke was caught off guard when the elves, along with their chief, knelt and apologized for causing any inconvenience to him. Leoninus and his fellow elves had no choice but to seek assistance from Luke's village, committing a grave error that endangered everyone in Luke's village. Luke didn't know how to respond to Leoninus' words other than reassuring him not to worry, as Luke knew the elves would have helped if the Orc King and the other orcs targeted the village. As Luke glanced at the other villagers, he offered the elves barbecue, knowing they must have been hungry and tired after the orc attack. While others celebrated another upcoming feast, Leoninus, on the other hand, remained confused. Seeing her father's puzzled look, Philia reminded him that Luke was just a generous person. Philia reassured her father that no one in the village harbored any thoughts of accusing them. Realizing that Philia's words were true, Leoninus then announced to all elves that they were at peace with Luke's village and would accept their kindness, deepening their relationship. When Leoninus wanted to help cook the meals, Melia was about to respond but was cut off when they immediately noticed their strong smell. They then suggested for Leoninus and the other elves to check out the bath. As Leoninus and the other elves immersed themselves in the warm bath, they never imagined they would have the chance to enjoy a bath after defeating the Orc King. While the other elves relaxed, Leoninus wondered if it was truly appropriate to receive benevolent hospitality after everything they did. After finishing their baths, Leoninus and the others were then fed with delicious meat. The night ended with everyone celebrating and enjoying the feast while Doriel was put back in jail once again. After the feast, Leoninus complimented Luke's village as it was exactly as great as the rumors he had heard. After extending his gratitude towards Luke, Leoninus was then informed by one of the elves that the state of their village was severely devastated. When Luke heard Leoninus' plan to have the other elves start rebuilding before winter comes, Luke offered Leoninus and the other elves refuge in the village until their village was fully rebuilt. Surprised by Luke's offer, Leoninus was now extremely ashamed of accepting more help from Luke. However, after hearing Luke's explanation, Leoninus accepted Luke's gracious offer. Leoninus kept to himself how ashamed he was of putting more burden on Luke, but they were yet again left with no choice, especially after Leoninus heard of a miraculous treasure in the village. When Philia announced that they would be returning to their village to repair it, Melia and Selen were a bit disappointed, and wondered if Philia and the others could stay a little longer. Philia was grateful for the offer. However, she insisted that they now head out since they still had to deal with beasts on the way to their village. Luke thought of an idea, and suggested to Philia and the others if he should build an underground tunnel for them to have a safe journey. Philia was surprised, wondering if Luke could really do that. The other elf somewhat doubted Luke, since the distance between the village and the elven village was quite far. Luke immediately proved them wrong by making an underground tunnel that led to the elven village. Philia was very impressed since the village was already in front of them. Since Luke had limited control of the area, he was only able to reach the outskirts of the village, but if Luke wanted to, he could have connected directly to the elven village. Luke had forgotten about the skill to seize the location since he thought he wouldn't be using it. However, knowing that the skill may be able to help the elves, Luke thought that it might be fine to use it. After suggesting to Philia that he would connect the underground tunnel to the village, Philia and the other elf were very delighted to hear such good news. After observing the state of their village, Philia could tell that they wouldn't be able to prevent the beasts from coming into their village. When Luke wanted to offer assistance again, Philia stopped him as she wished for them to rebuild the village with their own hands. Luke understood Philia's wishes. Luke had grown so accustomed to his gift's convenience that he had failed to consider that others might prefer different methods. While thinking if his own villagers feel the same way, Philia and the other help, on the other hand, were relieved that Luke had finally stopped, as they wished to live in his village quite a bit longer. At the same time in the village, Melia gathered the people who had received gifts. Melia then announced that Luke was the chosen one, sent by the gods to save the world. As they had yet to see Luke's full potential, Melia promised them that they would soon see it. The people that were gathered were slowly being manipulated by Melia. Now with a deranged look, Melia asked for everyone to devote their bodies to work for Luke, and the village would flourish. Everyone in the village shouted Luke's name repeatedly as they cheered for him. At Marquis Albert's territory, a group of people found themselves confined inside a cage. Raoul's retainer asked him if he was ready. After Raoul responded, he stepped outside, only to be ridiculed by the people inside the cage for his youth. These individuals were criminals, wondering if Raoul was the one they would be fighting. The guards informed them that they could use any means to win. Some of the criminals, unfamiliar with Raoul, wondered what he had done to end up fighting them. As the fight began, it turned silent immediately as everyone saw how Raoul single-handedly killed every criminal attempting to attack him. One particularly terrified criminal tried to run away, but Raoul was so fast that he immediately killed him with one slash. While the people were impressed by Raoul's swordsmanship, Lord Albert complimented Raoul and announced that Raoul would accompany him in the next battle. Feeling honored, Raoul promised to bring great results without fail. As the people cheered for Raoul, a messenger arrived and reported to Raoul that the governor had informed him that there were no villages in the Barren Lands after scouting it. Raoul laughed, knowing that there was no way a village could be established on the wasteland where Luke was stationed. Raoul was curious about why he was bothered by Luke, speculating that they would no longer see each other again. The only thing Raoul was disappointed with was that he was unable to witness Luke's supposed death. The messenger also reported that the house of Count Bajrata has not been able to locate Selin yet. Annoyed, Raoul gave a warning that the Count better not hide Selin. Raoul then outlined the events after winter, anticipating his first real taste of action. He guessed that it would be a huge battle unlike anything before. If House Albert wins the war, Lord Albert would acquire even greater territory. After that, Raoul would take over the current Albert territory. The vast land that was under Lord Albert's territory would then soon be Raoul's. Meanwhile, at the village, Luke felt cold as the snow had piled up outside, and the temperature had gotten even colder. After checking his abilities, Luke had finally found the defrosting feature, which he found very useful in winter. Luke was now pleased as the road was now snow-free, no longer causing problems for the traders. Winter in the wasteland is very cold. The village was located farther north than Albert's northern territory, receiving heavy snowfall due to its proximity to the mountain range. Traders were grateful for Luke defrosting the road as getting to the wasteland was tough in the winter season. Since the village started trading, merchants had picked up quite a bit, leading to more people settling in the village. However, with every welcome, a farewell wasn't far behind. For Luke, the rebuilding of the elven village was progressing smoothly, but for the elves who preferred to enjoy and stay at the village, they were somewhat sad even though their village was being restored faster than expected. Luke then remembered that Philia was still a villager, saddened by her soon departure. Luke removed Philia's status as a villager. Meanwhile, at the bathhouse, two old men were relaxing and making pleasant conversation when an elf suddenly joined their conversation. Surprised, the two old men immediately stood up and covered themselves, assuming a lady had entered the men's bath. However, they later realized that the elf was a man. The elf then squeezed himself between the two old men and shared what had happened to his village and how they ended up in Luke's village. After expressing how great Luke's village was, the two old men then thought of how mystical and majestic the elven village might be. As they had heard that elves take great care of the forests and natural springs, they were somewhat disappointed after hearing the elf preferring to live in Luke's village rather than in the forest. The elf then shared that the village was being rebuilt by the elves who chose to return. The elf then vowed that he would definitely live in Luke's village. As the elf told the two old men that they would soon celebrate once he becomes a villager, the two old men were a bit taken aback by what they had learned about the elves. But the one thing they all could agree on was that the village was exactly as the rumors said. The elves have lived quietly in the forest, avoiding mingling with other species. They portray themselves as a noble race that treasures nature. However, the real reason is that the elves have many natural enemies, forcing them to hide for survival. After discovering Luke's village and realizing it is a safer place, the elf no longer plans on returning to his village, having found a more convenient way of living. Unfortunately, the elf knows that if he insists on staying, the chief will not permit it. He now plans to get the villagers on his side and have them plead for him to stay. The elf feels lucky as he plans to use his charm and attractiveness to win over the villagers. As the elf displays himself in front of everyone, he receives plenty of compliments from the villagers. Thinking his display is enough, he is so confident that he believes he has established himself in the village. Unfortunately for him, due to his nude display in the streets, Nima immediately arrests the elf for public indecency and puts him in jail. Leoninus, upon hearing what happened, immediately apologizes to Luke. Assuming it may have been a difference in culture, Luke only asks the elf not to do it again. Ashamed of the elf's behavior, Leoninus asks him why he did it. The elf responds that he only wishes to live in the village. Hearing their conversation, Luke tells them that it won't be a bother for them to stay since the village is made up of immigrants. After being told by Luke that they have to think carefully about staying in the village since it is not an easy decision, Leoninus gathers all the elves and tells everyone that those who wish to stay in the village may choose to do so. To ascertain the number of those who choose to stay, Leoninus asks them to stay behind Luke while those who wish to return to the forest may follow him. Leoninus is in deep shock when no one steps forward to follow him. After hearing the other elves' opinions, Leoninus cannot believe that everyone would leave their roots, as he expected at least one or two to stay in the village. While the elves are extolling the benefits of living in the village, Melia is slowly whispering in their ears that Luke is cute as well, to which the elves eventually agree. When Philia encourages his father that the village would be safe since he would be there to protect it, Leoninus, surprised that Philia would also stay in the village, has no choice but to express what he truly feels, and that is to stay in the village as well. Luke then welcomes 238 people led by Leoninus. As spring comes, the rebuilding of the elven village finally comes to an end. After some time, Luke is busy helping the others when he suddenly receives a message from Satan that a group is coming from the east. Luke becomes confused, as there are only mountain ranges in the east. Based on their conversations, Satan guesses that the group is not normal humans but possibly dwarves. The dwarves are skilled with their hands and excel in forging and craftsmanship. When the group and Luke finally meet, one of the dwarves first introduces himself as Dolan. After Luke introduces himself as the chief of the village, he then notices that the other dwarves are now talking about him. When Luke asks the purpose of their visit, Dolan shares that they've been living in the mountain caves ever since their ancestors were driven off to the frontier. But then a monster suddenly appeared in the cave. The dwarves fortunately escaped, but they don't have anyone to turn to. As they wandered around aimlessly, they happened to see Luke's village from the mountains and were hoping to get some food. Luke guesses that the dwarves may have experience in interacting with humans, but he still wonders if they were persecuted in the same way as the elves. Philia suddenly pops out of nowhere and tells Luke that the dwarves deserve what happened to them. As Philia and the dwarves see each other, Philia reveals to Luke that both of their races do not get along very well. Philia shares how the dwarves wanted to rule the world, but due to divine punishment, the nation that the dwarves had built collapsed. After the two reveal that they have no knowledge of what the divine punishment was, Luke offers the dwarves to stay in the village after personally assessing them. Though Philia is annoyed at first, after seeing Luke's kindness, Philia keeps quiet and trusts Luke. The dwarves who still have doubts wonder if Luke wants their bodies. Luke knows that it is hard to trust an offer out of the blue, to which he explains how the village has developed from a variety of people and welcomes those who wish to live in their village no matter what race they are. Luke then guides the dwarves in some of their facilities while waiting for the food. As the dwarves notice a group of people gathering in one place, they wonder if it is the forge. Luke explains to the dwarves that it is not a forge but rather a public bathhouse. After explaining what the bathhouse is, the dwarves feel scared and nervous as they assume that everyone must be perverts for taking a bath with so many people around. After surveying their surroundings, the dwarves decided to stay and live in the village. Luke was pleased but surprised when the dwarves expressed their wish to stay in the underground passage. The dwarves explained that they had been living in caves their whole lives and that they also didn't like the sun. Understanding the dwarves' preferences, Luke used his abilities and customized the underground passage to be more suitable and livable for them. After Luke shared what he added and changed in the underground passage, the dwarves were in total shock after witnessing the rooms being built in an instant. The dwarves were then impressed by Luke's gift after learning from Melia. Tior had to ease Philia's mind since she found it unpleasant that the dwarves were living in the tunnel connected to the elven village. As the feast started, the dwarves were surprised at the quality of the alcohol in the village. They were further surprised when two of Luke's villagers shared that there were many options to choose from. After announcing that the entertainment would begin, a villager noticed that a dwarf was silent. Suddenly, the dwarf let out a roar, and all the dwarves became more lively after drinking alcohol. Luke and Philia were in total shock after witnessing the dwarves becoming so drunk. Morning came, and Dolan was surprised to find himself naked. Dolan became mad as Philia accused them of overdrinking and causing a scene. As Dolan sought Luke's support, they slowly remembered what had happened. When Dolan was about to confirm it with Luke, they were surprised when Luke asked them to only drink underground moving forward. The dwarves were now embarrassed for realizing that they were the culprits of the chaos that ensued the night before. Luke still couldn't believe that the ashamed dwarves were just dancing around with faces painted on their stomachs last night. After checking everyone's loyalty status, Luke felt glad since no one was particularly unhappy living in the village. With the increase in villagers from different races, Luke noticed that while dwarves and other refugees had latent gifts, the elves already possessed theirs. After being asked by Luke about the gifts, Philia revealed that it was thanks to their elven shamans. Philia explained that shamans can bless others with their gift of prayer, granting them a gift. Philia shared that only a few had the gift, as most in the village possessed archery or albus magic. Albus magic is related to light and life, mainly focusing on illumination, purification, and healing magic. When Dolan overheard Philia's comment, He immediately ran towards her and shared that they were craftsmen by nature and had spent decades honing their skills to master it themselves. When Luke decided not to give any gift unnecessarily, Dolan immediately changed his mind and wished to have one. As the dwarves gathered in the church and received gifts, Luke noticed one of the dwarves had a low loyalty status. Seeing that the dwarf named Donna was not yet of age, Luke could not bestow a gift upon her yet. When Luke walked towards her and asked if she liked weapons, Donna immediately turned around and showed Luke a stone tablet. Wondering if it was an ancient script, Luke asked if Donna could read it. Donna revealed that the tablet had been in the cave for a long time. She then pointed to a human form carved in the tablet, making Luke wonder if it was a golem. When Donna mentioned that it was an old weapon made by dwarves, Luke wondered if it was the armament to rule the world that Philia was talking about. Donna then mentioned that it was not an ordinary golem, as a person can ride inside it. This new information surprised Luke as he found it super cool. After learning about the ancient weapons of the dwarves, Luke knew that even with modern tech, it was still unthinkable that a person could ride and pilot such a weapon. Wondering if the dwarves used some fantastic technique that had been lost in time, Luke could not hide his excitement and decided to at least recreate the golem's shape. Using his customization ability, Luke molded the stone wall and finished the golem replica within 5 hours. Donna was very impressed with Luke's work, as it looked like a real golem. Luke then used the facility transfer and made the golem move, ending up carrying him and Donna. As Luke and Donna decided to walk through the village inside the golem, the villagers immediately noticed that the ground was shaking. After turning around, they were surprised to see the golem. Their worry immediately vanished after Luke showed himself to everyone and apologized for making a scene. After sharing with the villagers how he was able to make the golem, they were very impressed. However, as soon as they saw the golem leaving, they were still amazed at how lame the movements were. After finishing one lap, Luke and Donna were somewhat pleased with what they had accomplished. However, after a couple of seconds, the two ended up vomiting. As they had fun riding the golem, Luke wondered what it would feel like riding the real golem. Donna did not know what it felt like. However, she vowed to make the real golem someday. Luke had a gut feeling that after Donna received her gift, she might actually create the real golem. When Luke asked Donna why she wanted to make weapons, Donna responded that they were weak. Even though they stayed holed up underground, they were still chased out of their homes. Donna knew that if they had weapons, they could fight their enemies. After hearing Donna, Luke realized that an aversion to military force had grown inside of him. It was partly because he never liked fighting in the first place. Luke replaced the sorrow and anger of being exiled with an aversion to force. Even his village would have been destroyed if they didn't have any power. Luke agreed with Donna, but rather than using the weapon for harm, Luke wished to use it to protect themselves. Meanwhile, a certain exchange was taking place in the village. A man named Camer was fired and expelled from the kitchen. Camer was surprised and confused by the sudden release from work. The lady showed Camer a dish and asked him what it was. Camer explained that it was a creative dish that aimed for new texture and tastes. Unfortunately, the lady was not interested in Camer's experiment as she did not want to waste food. As the population increased, the daily life of the villagers became more sophisticated. Villagers expressed themselves in various ways, mainly through business to showcase their skills. However, some have yet to make the most of their abilities. When Luke saw Camer looking depressed, he asked what had happened. Camer shared that he felt unworthy since he couldn't help even though he had already received his gift. Luke then remembered one place he was curious about. He then asked Camer and Selin to follow him to the watchtower. Luke then pointed out to Selin and Camer that there was a rocky area to the west that could be something since he couldn't access that portion of the village map. Wondering if the area was already in someone's territory, or that a person may be living in that area. Since no one was causing problems, then there was no need to investigate further. Since the area looked tiny, Luke dismissed it as a labyrinth. Selin became excited and decided to escort Camer to the location. Since Selin could not see anything that may point to a labyrinth, she asked Camer if he could see something, to which Camer responded that he could feel something strange. To get a closer look, Camer immediately ran towards the rocks, which he then excitedly called Selin as he found a dungeon. Reporting to Luke that they had found a dungeon, Selin believed that what they discovered was likely an undiscovered or abandoned dungeon, as she couldn't find any human traces. Selin also believed that they would be able to get their hands on some valuable resources. Luke guessed that the land was under the jurisdiction of the owner, the dungeon master. Luke believed that this was the reason he couldn't access the dungeon as part of the village. Philia shared the legends that dungeons are games created by gods. In every dungeon, a series of established principles govern the challenge. Among these principles lies the allure of treasure, the ultimate reward sought by all who dare to conquer the dungeon's depths. Listening to Philia, Luke thought it seemed pretty fun. Selin commented that they would need to prepare before heading in, after assessing the dungeon to be narrow and complicated. Philia believed that a smaller group would be sufficient for the challenge. Not expecting to be given a chance to explore a dungeon, Luke then assigned Selin and Philia for the offensive. For their defense, Luke assigned Noel. Carrying luggage and items, Luke called in Gwart, thinking they would need his Herculean strength. For healing, Philia planned to bring Sophia, who could also use white magic, which she deemed very useful. Luke then left the exploration in Camar's hands and his labyrinthine search ability. As the last member of the exploration team, Luke called for Saya, thinking that her sense of danger would come in handy. However, Luke was surprised when Saya outright refused Luke's request, explaining that she needed to watch the kids. Saya informed Luke that she would look for another person who bore the danger sense gift to take her place. Listening to Saya, both Luke and Selin thought that people now took the conceit of gifts too lightly. Saya then approached Marco to see if he was interested in exploring the dungeon. As Selin observed Saya, she heard Melia crying, believing that she would once again be separated from Luke. When Selin mentioned that Luke would not be exploring with them, Luke was shocked. Seeing Luke's surprised look, Selin explained that the dungeon claimed the lives of even the most experienced adventurers, and she believed Luke would be better off staying in the village. Luke told Selin that he would not be a bother and would immediately turn back as soon as there was danger. However, Selin loomed over Luke, informing him that she needed to remind him of the people who also said the same last words. Selin then reassured the disappointed Luke that she would bring back tons of monster meat. As the exploration group entered the dungeon, they were able to witness the complex passages inside and believed they would have to do their best not to lose their way. Gwart started to panic as he no longer had any idea where they were. Feeling the same way, Selin asked Camar which way they should go next. Using his gift, Camar heard multiple sounds and then pointed out the path that he thought was best to continue. Hearing something coming from in front of them, Selin and Philia immediately prepared for a fight. Recognizing the monster as a blood wolf, Philia took out its eye right away, while Selin dealt a devastating blow. After clearing the monster, Selin noticed Marco's worried look and asked what was wrong. Marco found it strange, as he still had a bad feeling. Their attention was then diverted to the back, hearing someone scream. It was revealed that another blood wolf had appeared and was now behind Sophia. When Philia was about to shoot her arrow, she was surprised when the blood wolf was suddenly struck by an emerging wall. The blood wolf was then being toppled over by multiple golems, which confused Philia even more. Alarmed, Selin immediately used her ice gift to freeze the blood wolf in place. Recognizing the attack as similar to Luke's, another member of the exploration team shared that he had heard Luke was riding around in a golem the other day, and believed Luke might have sent the golems from the village to help them. However, Selin thought differently as she heard Luke's gasp much closer. Putting her hands inside Gwart's bag, Selin confirmed her guess after pulling out Luke from the bag. Selin once again reminded Luke of the danger lurking in every corner of the dungeon. Luke's action annoyed Selin even more, as he was placing himself in much danger. Luke apologized for his action and explained that he intended to pull out when he sensed danger but ended up missing his chance. But now that he was with the group inside the dungeon, Luke had learned that as long as he was close by, he could make any area part of the village regardless of its owner. This meant that Luke could use facility creation as much as he wanted. Hearing Luke, Selin sighed as she was left with no option other than to have Luke around. Taking in the blood wolf hide for now, Luke was amazed, as it was rare to see the hide in such a nice condition. Moving forward, Marco reported that the ominous feeling was back. Informing everyone that the monsters they would be facing would only get stronger, Selin instructed those who could not fight to stay in the middle. Luke became alarmed as he saw a minotaur headed their way. However, he was surprised when Gwart and the others had a different reaction, calling the minotaur beef instead. Gwart had heard that a minotaur's meat was super delicious. Noel also commented that the minotaur's meat was so soft it melted in the mouth, but not too gamey so one could keep eating more and more. All of a sudden, Gwart apologized to Luke, revealing that he was now sick and tired of orc meat. Selin was not surprised by Gwart's revelation, as they hadn't been short of it in ages. Noel was also starting to question himself. With Selin's lead, the group charged at the Minotaur. Selin announced to everyone that they would be having a barbecue that night. A fairy claiming to be the great dungeon master woke up as she sensed that something was different. Believing that an explorer had finally arrived at the dungeon, the fairy planned to do her best. All of a sudden, the fairy heard emergency sirens informing her that the dungeon was experiencing erosion. The fairy was shocked to see Luke and the exploration team having a barbecue. Gwart didn't realize that Luke could build facilities in dungeons. With houses and apartments, Marco believed that people could live normally inside the dungeon. Luke shared that he could only do it within a 50-meter range of where he had traveled. Listening to Luke, Philia believed that Luke's gift could completely change the world's approach to exploration. Selin realized that they might not need to go back to the village to drop off their things. The fairy, still confused, only observed the exploration group restarting their mission. Entering a room full of monsters, Gwart and the others recognized the monsters as bad bats and saber snakes. Both Philia and Selin took out the bats that were flying towards them, while Noel raised his shield to protect the others. Gort, on the other hand, was starting to get mad since there were too many bats for them to handle. Seeing that there were still more bats incoming, Luke made a quick hut for them to take shelter. After closing the door, the exploration team was left speechless about their situation. Gort was grateful to Luke but now wondered what their next step would be. Selin reassured Gort that they would be fine, as she had a plan for taking care of the bats. Casting ice magic outside, Selin shared that if she kept releasing ice magic, the monsters would eventually all go away. Seeing the bats slowly retreating, the fairy believed that the current situation she was facing was not good. Stepping out of the hut, the exploration team noticed that the monsters were mostly gone. Moving forward with their exploration, the team wondered what kind of monsters they would encounter next. Seeing a huge door, Luke felt differently about it. Selin wondered if the door was the boss monster's room. Selin told Luke that once they defeated the boss monster, they'd have cleared the dungeon. However, the monsters were usually much stronger than the other dungeon monsters. Luke was surprised to learn that they were already at the end of the dungeon. Philia laughed, as she was not surprised since they were an elite group. It was rare to get through a dungeon so easily. Philia explained that the boss monster was strong, but there was also a rumor that destroying the dungeon's core granted a mysterious power akin to a gift. Listening to Philia, Luke had no clue that there were other methods to clearing the dungeon. Luke wanted to give it a shot, eager to receive the reward if they beat the boss monster. Opening the door, Luke and the others saw 2 minotaurs. Seeing the minotaurs as the beef they had just eaten, the group then changed their minds, thinking that the minotaurs in front of them might be on a whole other level. Selin charged at the front while Philia prepared her arrow for an attack and Noel for defense. Gort did not expect that they would be able to defeat the minotaurs so quickly. Though the minotaurs weren't particularly weak, Gort could tell that they were no different from the others they'd faced. Seeing the treasure chest, Luke immediately approached it, wondering if he could open it. Marco informed Luke that he could open the chest since he didn't feel any danger from it and did not think of the chest as a trap. Opening the chest, Luke and Gort were not excited upon seeing that it was just a steel sword. Luke still did not mind about the reward, as he had fun with their first dungeon and thought that it would be a good memento. Philia told Luke to stop and reminded him that dungeons have various rules and regulations. One of the rules was that the reward must be commensurate with the level of difficulty. One couldn't have a dungeon that didn't follow the rules, and it was the explorer who decided if it was worth it. Philia made it clear that disproportionate rewards should not be accepted. When Luke asked what would happen if they did not accept the reward, Philia responded that the dungeon master must guide the explorers to where they are. If they waited for a while, Philia believed that either a path would appear or the dungeon master would show up. Both Luke and Gort understood and immediately shut the treasure chest. After some time, the two then became disappointed since nothing was happening. Camer then called for Luke, informing him that the path they were looking for was a tiny path behind them. Shocked to see the path to the dungeon master, Philia believed that the dungeon master intended to avoid meeting them at all costs. Running down the stairs, the fairy laughed, stating that she had not broken any rules. The fairy was still surprised at how fast Luke and the others had cleared the dungeon, pointing out that Philia also knew way too much about dungeons. The fairy was annoyed since she could not prepare a suitable reward on the spot in a deserted place, believing that explorers should really take the dungeon's circumstances into consideration. The fairy thought that dungeons were supposed to be about handsome heroes struggling valiantly. The fairy just wanted to lock up the handsome ones in the same room and see what they did. Wanting the dungeon to be famous, the fairy believed that for now it was impossible. Pretending that things did not happen, the fairy thought that the exploration team had probably just given up and left after taking a nap. To the fairy's surprise, Selin appeared in front of her. Curious as to how Selin got in, the fairy was even more surprised when more people started coming into her room. Luke explained that since the passage was too narrow, they decided to widen it. The fairy grew nervous as she had not expected that Luke and the others would make a new path. Seeing the dungeon core, Philia asked if they should break it. The fairy became more worried since she would die if the core were to break. The fairy dungeon master pouts, unhappy with the events that transpired in her dungeon. Luke apologized for using his ability as he had no other option, though he still felt it was unfair. The dungeon master became angry with Luke, telling him that what he had done did not justify messing up her dungeon. Glaring at the dungeon master, Philia pointed out that the dungeon master was the first one to play dirty by exploiting a loophole. Even if Luke hadn't expanded the passage, Philia would have destroyed the dungeon regardless of the outcome. Luke was surprised to learn that the dungeon master was a fairy. Exchanging greetings with Luke and claiming to be cute, the dungeon master explained how she really wanted to prepare a more luxurious reward for all of them, but the steel sword was the best she could do in the deserted dungeon. The dungeon master felt ashamed and ended up hiding. Nervous, Luke asked about the connection between the reward and the dungeon being deserted. Luke hoped that the dungeon master would reveal a scary story behind the reward and the dungeon. The dungeon master explained that if many people came into the dungeon, she would earn lots of dungeon points. With the points she gathered, she could prepare rewards and place traps and monsters. However, if the dungeon got cleared before the points came in, then they would end up in the situation they were currently in. Thinking they were quite similar, Luke revealed his gift to the dungeon master and that he also needed points to build facilities. Puzzled about village points, the dungeon master wondered if it was a power derived from the dungeon. Angered, the dungeon master pointed out that Luke had not just created a hole in her room but had also eroded parts of her dungeon. Luke was surprised that the dungeon master could detect the changes in her dungeon. The dungeon master explained that she and the dungeon were inseparable, like body and spirit. It would be natural for the dungeon master to notice if her body was overtaken, sharing how terrified she was when a part of the dungeon was being overtaken. Luke apologized as he understood the fear the dungeon master would feel. When Luke put things back to normal, he apologized once again, realizing that he couldn't revert things once they had turned into his territory. Luke's words only angered the dungeon master even more. Enraged at having her body messed with, the dungeon master demanded that they leave immediately. Selen and the others began to get confused as they listened to the conversation between Luke and the dungeon master. When Luke asked the dungeon master if the area he seized was no longer under her control, the dungeon master, sensing that the area still accepted her commands, believed it would be fine. Since Luke would not be able to revert the changes he made inside the dungeon master asked him for a favor instead. Finding the dungeon very boring every day since no one had challenged it since it was created, the dungeon master wanted Luke to gather people to develop her dungeon. Others were not surprised that no one had tried exploring the dungeon as it was located in a deserted area, since they were able to defeat the monsters. Selen believed that other explorers would then have an easier time defeating the monsters that would be reproduced. Thinking of ways to attract people to the dungeon, Luke then informed Berlid of his idea of moving the village. Shocked, others thought they would be abandoning the village. Luke clarified that they would not be abandoning the village but instead moving the entire village as is. Since the dungeon grows as more people enter it, Luke planned to merge the dungeon and the village so that the dungeon could grow and the village could also benefit from valuable materials and items. If Luke used his facility transfer, he believed he would be able to move the entire village. However, the last time he moved while inside the facility, he experienced severe motion sickness. With that experience, Luke thought they needed to figure out how to move everyone without making them feel sick. Luke then ordered the others to gather the people and discuss the matter. Testing out ideas for moving the village, Luke was informed that if they didn't manage it by walking on 2 legs or anything similar, they might be able to pull it off with minimal shaking. Concerned about the rocks along the way, Donga suggested they test things out with a facility modeled after the village. Using telepathy, Luke informed his villagers that he would be moving the village now. Since it was dangerous, Luke advised everyone to stay inside the facilities and hold on to something for safety. Luke managed to move the entire village safely so that even the communication officer was not disturbed by the move. A merchant couldn't hide his happiness, hoping to earn good money after preparing many valuable items. The merchant was shocked to see the entire village sliding. The merchant became nervous when he suddenly heard Luke's voice advising him to step back since they were currently moving the village. Luke reassured the merchant that they would reconnect the roads after they finished. After completing the move, Luke thanked his villagers for their cooperation. Confused, the dungeon master pointed out to Luke that connecting his village to the dungeon underground would not help in generating dungeon points. Luke then revealed his solution for the dungeon points problem: moving the dwarves' houses into the dungeon. Seeing the dwarves' fascinated expressions at having to live inside a dungeon, the dungeon master thought that the dwarves' presence would indeed help in generating points every day, but still wondered if they would be safe, as the dungeon could be quite dangerous. Luke reassured the dungeon master that he would fortify the area to make it safer for the dwarves. As the dwarves started moving their houses, the dungeon master couldn't help but be in awe after seeing so many people, believing that the dungeon points would pile up very quickly. Luke then advised the dungeon master to let Doran and the others know if anything happened, so he could be notified. The dungeon master thanked Luke and told him that they could freely visit the dungeon anytime. The dwarves were a bit offended when the dungeon master requested that Luke also bring some handsome guys. After safely reconnecting the roads, Luke spoke with the merchant, apologizing for the delay. Although the village's location had changed a bit, there were no major inconveniences. A few days later, Milia approached Luke wanting to show him something. Seeing so much food in one place, Luke thought there was a festival and asked if something special had happened. Milia corrected Luke, revealing that the day marked exactly 1 year since the village was founded. The feast celebrated the memorable anniversary of the beginning of Luke's glory and greatness. Uncovering her surprise, Milia revealed a commemorative statue of Luke. With an angry expression, Melia then told the audience to cheer for Luke. While feeling confused by what he had witnessed, Luke's villagers started cheering his name. Confused, Luke asked Melia to explain what he was staring at. Melia had been secretly making a statue of Luke to show him one day. Thanks to the dwarves' craftsmanship, Melia and the others managed to skillfully recreate Luke's dignified figure. As the dwarves asked Luke if he liked it, they hoped that he was pleased with their work. Though Luke had no idea what to say to them, he simply thanked the dwarves. Melia revealed another commemorative item for Luke, showing him a book that chronicles his glorious journey. Luke was speechless as he did not expect that his villagers would write a legend about him. Thinking that what they had done was already too much, Luke was puzzled as to why everyone was on board with something like that. Melia informed Luke that the author of the book was Mr. Tottle, who had the literary gift. Tottle was glad that he was finally able to make use of his talent. Hearing Tottle, Luke realized that the statue in the book had helped everyone gain a sense of achievement. Upon revealing that Melia and Tottle planned to publish more books in the future and hoped that they would reach outside the village, Luke's first thought was hoping that Melia and Tottle would not continue with their plans. Accepting the book, Luke immediately read it. Reading through the lines of the supposed chronicle, he was shocked, as he did not remember saying some of the words in the book. Sighing, Selin told Melia that she did not understand Luke at all and shared that Luke was not the type of person who would say something written in the book. Selin explained how Luke was much more unreliable, but when push came to shove, Luke could stand up to any formidable foe. Listening to Selin, Luke thought she was not serious. He thought Tottle could write something cooler, like the exhilaration of riding the golem. When Luke described the power and experience of riding the golem, Tottle immediately thought Luke was aiming for a comedic angle, which was not Luke's point at all. Both Melia and Tottle became excited, thinking of ways they could explore a variety of stories and even create a spin-off. Not pleased with what he was hearing from Melia and Tottle, Luke asked if it really had to be him as the model for the books. Nima then told Luke that being liked was often a blessing and a burden. No longer thinking about Melia and Tottle's plans, Luke was just happy to be able to celebrate with everyone. As the night of the celebration continued, somewhere in the forest, a mysterious creature sensed an intrusion and was very curious about who dared to disturb its slumber. The next day, Luke received a congratulatory message for exceeding 3,000 people, leveling his village up to 7. With the arrival of spring, the village number had grown even more. The central area where everyone resided, which they also called the village, had expanded to encompass not only the entire wilderness but also the forest to the north and the mountains to the east. Checking the new facilities that could be built, Luke thought that all of the available options were good and wondered where he should start. Going through his new skills, Luke was shocked to learn that his village appraisal level had increased, making it more detailed and confusing. Looking through the required information options, Luke noticed the criminal tendencies and thought that he needed that ability. Hearing a screech, Luke said that something had invaded again. Curious if it was a monster given its size, Luke called Satane telepathically, informing him that a huge monster was heading towards the village from the border. Luke ordered Satane to notify everyone immediately, which Satane complied with right away. Staring at the sky, Luke was shocked as he thought he was looking at a lizard-like monster. But as the monster fully revealed its face, Luke immediately thought of it as a dragon. After receiving the news that a monster was nearby, Philia immediately approached Luke. Looking up, Philia recognized the monster as a tree dragon, a plant-based creature that mimics dragons. Upon confirming that the tree dragon did not have the same aggressiveness as a true dragon, Philia told Luke that they couldn't let their guard down. Tree dragons, like plants and flowers, absorb nutrients from the ground and rarely move. However, Philia was very puzzled since the tree dragon had gone to the trouble of leaving the forest and appearing in the wilderness. Thinking that something was wrong, Philia told Luke that they were in trouble since the tree dragon was headed straight for them. Seeing how huge the tree dragon was, Philia believed they wouldn't stand a chance against it. Luke immediately ordered everyone in the village to take cover underground. As the villagers ran for safety, Luke, who was nervous, was confused after seeing the tree dragon stop its movement. Meanwhile, Selin, along with Luke and Philia, was curious about what was happening with the tree dragon since they had been hiding for an hour already. Seeing that the tree dragon was situated in their field, the three wondered what the tree dragon wanted. The villagers were shocked at how huge the tree dragon was. Seeing that the tree dragon was not moving, Luke thought it might be feeling unwell. Luke asked Nelul, who had the gift of animal's heart, if he knew anything. Nelul was having a hard time understanding the monster since it was also part plant. Nelul believed that the tree dragon was harmless, as it had a content expression. Though the tree dragon might be harmless, the villagers were still annoyed because the tree dragon was lying on top of their crops. Luke was relieved to learn that the tree dragon was not hostile, but he was still curious as to why it had gone out of its way to come to the village. Nelul could only guess that the tree dragon liked the field and the village. Nelul discerned that the tree dragon had been woken up by the smell of the delicious soil. Luke and the others were impressed by the soil in the village, as it was able to awaken a sleeping tree dragon. Though Taor was upset about what had happened to his crops, he was still pleased that a tree dragon appreciated his soil. When Taor tapped the tree dragon's snout as it tried to build a connection, he ended up getting his head bitten. Nelul then informed everyone that the tree dragon forbade weaklings from touching him. Nelul believed that the tree dragon planned to rest in the field, as it looked very sleepy. Luke thought that if they did not approach the tree dragon recklessly, they should be fine. All of a sudden, a round object bounced on top of Taor's head. Philia immediately recognized the round object as a tree dragon's seed. Relaying the message from the tree dragon, Nelul told Taor to eat it and nurture his intelligence. Since then, the tree dragon has remained in the field, occasionally giving the village its seed. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon master was sighing, envious of the tree dragon's power and its ability to bear fruit. The dungeon master's mood suddenly changed when Luke noticed that the dungeon had grown quite a lot. Proud of herself, the dungeon master revealed that she had increased the difficulty. Moreover, the floors had expanded from 2 to 5. The dungeon master had been considering placing a bunch of strong monsters and traps at the beginning to heighten the challenge. Listening to the dungeon master, Luke pointed out that if the dungeon became too hard, people would retreat immediately, causing the dungeon master to earn no points. Luke suggested making the first floor easy to encourage people to stay longer. Tons of people would gather in the dungeon for monsters and materials. Luke believed that it was best if the difficulty increased with each floor. Listening to Luke's comments, the dungeon master was offended, thinking that Luke considered her dungeon unfun to conquer. Though the dungeon master aimed to create a cool, strong, and awesome dungeon, she also saw Luke's point. The dungeon master finally decided to create an approachable dungeon. While Luke and the dungeon master shared ideas on what monsters to place on the floors, Luke's name was suddenly called by the dwarves. Wanting Luke to see something, Luke was surprised by the weapons the dwarves had laid out. Luke was impressed by the beautiful works of the dwarves. Considering the dwarves' idea of selling the weapons to the visitors of their village, Luke thought it would help adventurers with their dungeon exploration. As the three discussed ideas, they realized they were actually creating a dungeon economy. Luke and the others became excited to immediately work on their new idea. Several days later, a group of adventurers arrived at the village. The adventurer mage, named Hazina, did not expect that people actually lived in the deserted land. Alec told Hazina to always trust reliable merchant information. While the team scout was amazed by the village, Guy suggested that they set up a base for the meantime. Receiving a report from Satane about the people entering the village, Luke became excited after checking their abilities. The dungeon master was amazed at how Luke was able to learn so much about the adventurers with just telepathy. Knowing the capabilities of telepathy, the dungeon master had doubts about how Luke obtained such detailed information. In the end, Luke admitted that he had turned the adventurers into villagers, which then granted him access to their information. Though Luke tried to explain his reasoning to the dungeon master, he still couldn't escape her lecture. Annoyed, the dungeon master made it clear to Luke never to turn her into a villager without her permission. Luke approached Alec and introduced himself as the village chief. As the two exchanged pleasantries, Luke confirmed with Alec that the place did indeed have a dungeon. Before proceeding with their dungeon exploration, Luke asked if they wished to take a look around the village. Alec and the others were amazed, unable to believe that the village had everything. Upon seeing the prices of the weapons, both Hazina and Dill asked Luke who his supplier was, since the weapons were considered to be of high quality, yet were being sold so cheaply. When Luke revealed that the weapons were made by dwarves, the adventurers were surprised, as dwarves were so difficult to come by. Alec wondered if the village had been developed to cater to adventurers. Luke revealed that Alec and his group were the first adventurers to visit their village. After discovering the dungeon, Luke hoped that it would provide an opportunity for everyone's skills to be put to good use. Alec was beaming with laughter as he praised how amazing the village was. Conversing telepathically, Luke informed the dungeon master that the adventurers were as handsome as she had expected. Excited for their first dungeon explorers, Luke was curious about what the dungeon master had prepared in the big hall at the end of the path. Both Luke and Dolan were shocked to learn that the dungeon had such an instruction. Believing that the adventurers would include a handsome guy, the dungeon master had placed a rule that those who entered could not leave until they had whispered sweet things. The adventurers were confused about the purpose of the bed inside the dungeon. The dungeon master explained that the room also serves as a safety area where one can sleep. Though it was easy to understand, Dolan thought that others would find it more confusing instead. Hazina asked her group to wait, as she needed time to prepare herself. However, she was ignored as her teammates proceeded to enter the dungeon. Going through without any problems, Alec hoped they had not overlooked anything. Stepping into the dungeon, Alec was surprised to be immediately greeted by a flock of bad bats. Calling Hazina's name, Hazina quickly understood what to do and used her fire magic to defeat the bad bats. Believing they had succeeded in clearing the bats, they were surprised to learn that another flock of bad bats was headed toward them. As the adventurers were getting overwhelmed by the swarm of bad bats, Hazina came to their aid, instructing the others to dodge. In the end, the group managed to defeat the bad bats, but they also got themselves burned. Alec noticed that whenever they stepped on an unstable floor plate, the bad bats would come and attack them. Upon learning about the traps inside the dungeon, Hazina realized they might not have enough magic for the dungeon, since there was still a long way to go. Alec found relief upon learning that the plates deactivated once stepped on. Now more cautious, the group slowly made their way, fought monsters, and marked the path they had taken. Seeing fur and claw marks on the path, the group expected they might encounter several beasts with claws. Alec decided for the group to head back for now, since they had explored the general terrain up to their current location. Back in the village, Alec enjoyed a cold drink, still unable to believe that they could get high-quality food while clearing a dungeon. Hazina and the others were pleased to hear that they were the only adventurers in the village, having all the treasures to themselves. Thinking it a waste, Alec informed everyone that he had already sent a message to all of his other adventurer friends about the village and dungeon. Hearing this, Luke's eyes brightened as their plan had worked. Several days later, thanks to Alec, the number of adventurers started to increase. Both Dolan and the Dungeon Master were very excited as their plan had been a big hit. Stepping outside, Luke encountered Alec and asked if he was headed to the dungeon. Alec responded affirmatively and shared with Luke that they had recently made it to the second floor. Knowing what Alec and his teammates were capable of, Luke thought they might perform even better if they were blessed with gifts. When Luke asked Alec if they were not going to receive a blessing, Alec was bashful, telling Luke that they were just normal villagers and believed they would not be rewarded with gifts. Luke was speechless upon hearing Alec and then revealed that they could get a free blessing if they visited the village's church. Since it sounded very shady, Alec thanked Luke for the information but decided to refuse. Luke tried to persuade Alec, but he remained adamant about not trying out the church. In the end, Alec and his group visited the church and received their very own gifts. Hazina obtained the gift of Rubrum magic, Dill received enemy detection, while Guy got Albus magic. For their leader, Alec received the gift of greatsword skill. Noticing Alec's expression, Hazina asked him what the problem was, as she thought Alec had always wanted to receive a gift. Alec explained that receiving a gift felt anticlimactic, as he had always thought only nobles could be gifted. Realizing the bigger picture about the gifts, Alec apologized to Luke for doubting him and thanked him for allowing him to obtain his dream. Meanwhile, in the wilderness, rumors spread of a village in the deserted land that had gained attention, with many people visiting it. Entering the village, the governor of Northy, Dantho, and his guard were shocked to see that the village was now bustling. Everyone looked well dressed, and the village now had an abundance of food despite it being the dead of winter. Dantho's guard knew the rumors of the village, but with the activity they had witnessed, they were sure the village could no longer hide itself. Dantho cried, believing that Luke had gone a little too far. Hearing Dantho's voice calling his name, Luke was very pleased. However, he did not expect that Dantho and his guard would already be relishing the foods being sold in their city. Dantho explained the reason for his visit, which was to report important news to Luke. In the most recent war, the House of Albert had managed to defeat the Kingdom of Schneger. The news surprised Luke, as he had thought that the war had just broken out the other day. Dantho agreed with Luke, and further shared that the House of Albert concluded the war within a month. The House of Albert's army captured Schneger's cities one after another, and made their way to the capital in the blink of an eye. The fiercest battle took place in the capital, where the Albert army overwhelmed the enemy and won. Luke still could not believe that a large-scale war would end in just 1 month. Since the House of Albert has taken over Schneger, they now hold the greatest power in the kingdom. Dantho also shared that Raoul, Luke's younger brother, contributed greatly in his first campaign. Raoul has been entrusted with the administration of the former Albert territories moving forward. With Lord Albert focusing on consolidating his rule over the Schneger territories, Dantho pointed out to Luke that the rumors of the village could not be kept secret forever, and that only time would tell when Raoul would find out about the village. Dantho suggested thinking of countermeasures before it was too late. Dantho admitted that he was now overstepping his boundaries, but still offered advice to Luke, the ruler of the village. With a large number of villagers and a stable supply of commodities, the village would be sought after. Thinking of his younger brother, Luke wondered if Raoul would truly come to his village and take it away. Melia, who surprised Luke, told him that Raoul would certainly come, as he is that type of person. If Luke is seen as a minor threat, Melia was certain that Raoul would come and squash Luke right away, though everyone thought that the task assigned to Luke would be impossible. He was still able to create a livable village in the middle of nowhere. Melia was certain that once Raoul found out about the village, he would take immediate action. Selin also voiced her concern, agreeing with Melia that Raoul would certainly come and take what is Luke's. Kellen reminded Luke how Raoul would throw stones at servants just to entertain himself. Thinking about his brother, Luke realized that he did not know much about him, as they couldn't get along because of their different status. Luke also realized that he was at fault for not interacting with Raoul earlier and for being influenced by the people surrounding him. With so much negativity between them, Luke and Raoul's relationship became shallow. The half-siblings' relationship reached a point where Luke would just watch from afar to check on Raoul. Luke then kept wondering about the possibilities that would have happened if he had reached out to Raoul even more. A few days passed, and a messenger from the House of Bajrata came to pick Selin up, confirming that there were rumors of the village spreading. A servant of the House of Bajrata had not believed in the village at first and wanted to investigate, but was surprised when he actually found Selin. When Selin told the messenger that she would not be going home, the messenger told Selin how her father was so worried about her. Annoyed by the image of her father, Selin then brought out delicious food and persuaded the messenger to move to the village. With Selin's tactic, she was able to convince the messenger to live in the village and become a villager. Selin's father, who was happy to know that his daughter had been found, was enraged when he learned that the messenger he sent wished to emigrate. Salius, Selin's younger brother, reassured their father that he would bring Selin back. In the past, Salius could never defeat his sister. However, after entering the battlefield and fighting with House Albert, Salius gained experience and increased his confidence. Salius also witnessed Raoul's strength firsthand, making him believe that Selin must submit to Raoul. The head of House Bajrata calmed down and relied on Salius to bring his sister back. Back at the village, Selin received a telepathic message that her younger brother, along with guards, was visiting the village and was not hesitating to fight. Recognizing Salius's plan, Selin scoffed and was eager to teach them a lesson. When the village learned that Selin would be fighting with her family, news of it spread quickly and immediately gathered people who would support Selin and fight alongside her. When Salius finally reached Luke's village, he was shocked to see for himself that there was actually a town in the middle of nowhere. Seeing his escort's reaction, Salius told them not to be intimidated by the village. When asked by the guards about the purpose of his visit, Salius introduced himself as a member of House Bajrata and stated that he intended to take his sister away. The guards believed Salius and allowed him to enter the village. Salius and his escorts were in shock when they saw how lively the village was. The escorts also noticed how rugged the gatekeepers looked and thought that they were bandits, but could not confirm it since they wore proper clothes. Salius was then greeted by both Luke and his sister Selin. Knowing the reason for her brother's visit, Selin went straight to the point and told her brother that she would not be going home. Surprised, Salius told his sister that he would not accept such an answer, and then shared how worried their father was. Selin knew that their father did not really want her to come home but intended to use her to strengthen their family ties with House Bajrata. Salius, who saw the reason for their father's actions as a way of caring about their family's future, told Selin that as a noblewoman, it was her duty to follow the will of the patriarch. Not caring if her father disowned her, Selin made her point clear that she would never go back to their home. Seeing no other option, Salius drew his sword, planning to use force to bring his sister back. Seeing how a fight was about to break out, the whole village became wild. Salius and his escorts were shocked to see tons of villagers appearing out of nowhere. Salius became mad at the villagers for thinking of their family problem as entertainment. With the fight about to start, both Nima and Satane appeared and started commentating on the fight. Salius initiated the fight with his aggressive strikes. As an observer, Satane immediately noticed that both siblings had the style of dual wielding, with the only difference being their secondary gifts. Nima was impressed with Salius's extraordinary speed, and believed that his skilled control over wind using Virtus magic was the reason Salius could move so fast. Now increasing her pace, Selin used her liveness magic that allowed her to control ice. Salius became overwhelmed by Selin's magic and hastily dodged all of the ice coming toward him. While Salius was distracted, Selin had already distanced herself, giving herself an advantage to use long-range attacks. Meanwhile, Salius's escorts started a fight of their own, charging at the villagers who were supporting Selin. With the villagers easily blocking their attacks, the Bajrata soldiers were surprised by the villagers' heavy strikes. Though the soldiers slowly gained an advantage through numbers, their momentum was stopped when the villagers started showing their true skills. The villagers' counterattacks surprised the soldiers, making them think that the villagers possessed gifts that only nobles should have. Seeing how the ground was easily destroyed struck fear into the soldiers' hearts. The villagers laughed and looked smug, very pleased with teaching the soldiers a lesson for underestimating them. Seeing his sister distracted, Salius grabbed the opportunity and launched a surprise attack. Salius became annoyed that his sister was looking away while they were in the middle of a fight. Charging towards Selin, Salius boasts to his sister how he has won wars. However, Selen was not impressed with Celius's achievement. Selen's ice magic once again created an opportunity for her to distance herself. However, Selen's action proved to be fruitless, as Celius's extraordinary speed allowed him to catch up to Selen and even surround her in all corners. Celius becomes cocky since his sister could not keep up with his movements. However, Selen thought that Celius was still naive and was surprised by pinpointing his location and launching a counterattack. Celius did not expect Selen to freeze a large area around her at random. Selen, who's good at endurance battles, asks her brother how long he can keep up with his speed. Angered, Celius calms himself and believes that he is still in control of the fight since Selen has only been on the defensive. Celius, who had put his faith in their soldiers, thought that they had already achieved victory. However, Celius was shocked when he saw that the soldiers were now lying on the ground unconscious. Celius could not believe that his soldiers, who were experienced in battle, lost to common villagers. Selen tells Celius that the escorts that Celius brought were pretty confident, which led to them losing. Enraged, Celius tells Selen how he refuses to believe that a village that could defeat their experienced soldiers could lose to common villagers. In a matter of seconds, Celius also faced defeat at the hands of his sister. Celius was frustrated upon learning that he still has not closed the gap between him and his sister, even though he has been training so hard for the past year. As Luke offered to patch up the injured, Celius felt humiliated for receiving hospitality from their foes, asking Luke how long he plans to look down on them. Philia appeared and shared what Celius truly felt. She then went on and ordered Celius to accept his loss and comply. Celius becomes mad at Philia for touching him so casually, but was shocked when he saw that Philia was an elf. Philia, who has gotten accustomed to the village, had made herself forget how they usually interact with humans. Celius, who was in shock, could not believe that he had finally seen an elf. Since Celius only knew of elves as a race in the legends, he becomes curious as to why an elf is in the village. Seeing Celius's reaction, Selen remembers how Celius was once obsessed with elves. Celius admitted that he admires the elven race but felt that talking about them while an elf is present would be insensitive. Seeing how knowledgeable Celius was about her race, Philia laughed and stated that she expected no less from Selen's brother, and was relieved to see that Celius is a good person. When Philia offered to patch Celius up, Celius was unable to speak and accepted the offer. In the end, Celius sent out a letter to his father that he won't be able to return home for the time being. The letter shocked the head of the household as he could not believe that his children had now left him. Meanwhile, Raoul asks his servant if they have received any reply from the governor yet. Although they've sent out several letters of summons, the governor has not sent out any responses or any visits at all. With Raoul feeling betrayed, his servants then inform him that they've brought him a servant who works in the governor's mansion. The governor's servant, who told Raoul that he has risked his life to find out the governor's secret, presents to Raoul the proof of the governor's disloyalty. When Raoul saw and read the report that was sent during their investigation about the village, Raoul laughs as he shares his disbelief towards the report, and that the town would not be possible to build in just a year. Raoul then becomes nervous as he knows that building a huge town would be impossible, yet he senses something bad about the village. Raoul then dispatched some spies, as he planned to conduct an undercover investigation. When the spies finally reached the village, they were shocked to see that there were castle walls. All of a sudden, the villagers fell into a pit, which surprised them. Unbeknownst to the villagers, Nima was just hiding in the dark. When the spies turned around, they were puzzled when they saw Nima in front of them. One of the spies pointed out that Nima was behind prison bars, which led the others to ask if Nima had been caught. Nima flared up and told the spies that they were the ones getting caught, after which she asked the spies the reason why they came to their village. Shocked, the three spies told Nima lies. When Nima asked the three if they were not lying, to which the three responded that they were not, Satane then telepathically told Nima the truth. Upon learning that the three were spies from the House Albert, Nima asked for more details from them. One of the spies then noticed that there was something beyond the bars. When the spy looked closer, he immediately broke into a cold sweat after seeing multiple devices for torture. Nima then asked the spies if they knew what would happen if she found out they were lying. Before the trap pit closed, the spies' cries echoed throughout the prison trap. Looking at the visitors' statuses, Luke confirmed that the danger showing from the spies had disappeared, confirming that the discussions went well. After the incident, the House Albert continued to send several more spies, which surprised Luke, that Raoul would go so far as to send multiple spies to check on his village. Looking at his status board, Luke saw that there was a large group of people headed toward the village. Meanwhile, in the Albert territory, Raoul had a merchant kidnapped in order to extract information from Luke's village. Raoul warned the merchant that his house would be investigated and that anything related to the wasteland would be confiscated. Though Raoul had sent out multiple spies to gather information about the village, he did not expect that he would gain more knowledge from the people who had gone to the village before. By forcing the merchants, Raoul confirmed that the village was, in fact, real. The truth enraged Raoul, thinking that Luke was getting in his way again. Upon seeing so many people near the village, Selin asked Luke if those were refugees. However, Luke believed that they were not, since they were too organized. When Luke had an unexpected visit from Dantho, he was surprised to see so many soldiers behind the governor and asked him if something had happened. Dantho shared that Raoul had found him suspicious, which made him decide to escape from Raoul's territory and stay in Luke's village for safety. For the soldiers, Dantho shared a nasty rumor that Luke was gathering forces in the wasteland to rebel against House Albert. The rumor shocked Luke, and he told the governor that the rumors were false. Dantho believes in Luke. However, he is worried that the rumors would continue to spread and become more credible. Because of the rumor, Dantho thought that Raoul would attack the village, which made him decide to bring his soldiers to aid Luke in the fight. Luke was touched by Dantho's genuine offer of an alliance against House Albert. Luke asked the governor if he was certain about allying with him against House Albert. Dantho explained how he really had no other option since his future was bleak for him. However, from the moment the governor visited the village, he had decided to side with and stay in Luke's village. After receiving more villagers, Luke received a notification that he had reached level 8 and that he had surpassed 10,000 villagers. Knowing that getting depressed was not an option in their time of crisis, Luke shared with Dantho that they had captured multiple spies that came from House Albert. When Luke asked Nima about the status of the spies they had captured, Nima told Luke that the spies no longer harbored any ill will and had become more obedient. The spies had become more adorable and were now eager for the food that Nima brought. When one of the spies asked the identity of the person beside Nima, they were shocked to learn that the young kid was none other than Luke Albert, the village chief. Seeing the spies' surprised reaction, Nima asked the spies if they did not recognize Luke's face. The spies explained that Luke was someone who could not be easily met and had only been seen from afar. After understanding everyone's point of view, Luke made a request to the spies and wished to learn about the Albert territory in detail. Seeing Luke's sincerity in protecting the village, the spies, who had vowed not to share information, decided to tell Luke what he wanted. Not wishing for the beautiful village to be destroyed either, the spy offered to share more information with Luke. With the rumors of the village flourishing, it was already planned to attack the village with a certain number of soldiers. When the spy mentioned a certain amount, Luke assumed that Albert would only be sending a small group, but the spy corrected him and revealed that around 5,000 soldiers were the planned number of troops to attack the village. Elves are a legendary race that has disappeared from the public eye due to a history of being targeted for their beauty and the mystery of their longevity. Knowing the history of the elves, Celius, who's mesmerized by Philia's fighting, vowed to protect the elven race at all cost. Celius was surprised when his sister ordered him to return as soon as possible. Selin had a feeling that Celius would suggest that they surrender. Celius, agreeing with what Selin said, shared that surrendering is the most peaceful and bloodless way. Knowing what type of person Raoul is, Selin was certain that Raoul would not back down. Wanting to protect Luke at all cost, Selin and the others were left with no other choice other than to fight Raoul and his 5,000 soldiers. Selin agrees with Celius that surrendering is the best way to solve the matter seriously, which is why Selin does not want Celius to demoralize their troops once they face their adversary. Philia, who was listening to the conversation, told Celius that he can leave if he is against fighting Raoul. Philia clarifies that what they are doing is simply solving their problem and to not worry about them. Celius turns away as he could not bear to look at the kindness that Philia is radiating. In the end, Celius decided to stay and fight, stating how he does not want to abandon his older sister. Meanwhile, at Governor Dantho's mansion, Raoul arrived with his soldiers and was surprised to see that the room was empty. Raoul could not believe that the governor was the first to abandon the city and flee. Raoul then ordered his men to stock up and prepare thoroughly as they would take on a 5-day journey towards Luke's village. On the other hand, Luke was panicking, unsure of what to do against Raoul and his 5,000 soldiers. Seeing Luke's expression, Selin tells Luke to not be afraid. Selin asks the villagers if they do not want to escape, reminding them that they are now facing a member of the Albert household. Luke felt touched when everyone gathered up and was determined to protect Luke and the village no matter what. However, behind their smiling faces lies nervousness, as in reality, they have no other option than to fight and win. As night came, Luke was sitting on top of the walls, wanting to ask Raoul why it had reached a point where they were now trying to fight one another. When Selin saw Luke looking at his map, she suggested to Luke that he take a rest first, since they already had a lookout for Raoul's soldiers. Luke was worried about the fake rumors spreading as they were being used to justify a cause. Luke wonders if Raoul sees it that way. Wanting to know more about Raoul to resolve the problem peacefully, Luke thought of an idea. Meanwhile, at Raoul's camp, he received news that the walled city existed, which angered him. Raoul calmed his soldiers down and shared with them the possibility that Luke's village did not have much manpower, nor proper training due to it consisting only of refugees and civilians. Raoul advised his soldiers to rest, as they would be going into the wastelands in the morning. While laying down on his makeshift bed, Raoul couldn't sleep, as his anger kept him awake. To Raoul's surprise, he saw Luke's face up close, which shocked him. Raoul, who was momentarily frightened, asked Luke where he came from. Luke wanted to have a conversation with Raoul, sharing with him that he was not trying to bring down House Albert. Luke expressed how he liked his village and wished to live peacefully, no longer wanting to take anything from Raoul or inherit the House Albert. Raoul was shocked at first and thought that Luke had visited him with the purpose of surrendering in order to protect his village. However, that was not the case, as Luke pointed out that he had no plans of surrendering and only wished to know more about Raoul. However, Raoul did not believe Luke, as he was certain that Luke had visited him to impose his ideals on him. Before Raoul could land his attack, Luke went back underground and hastily escaped. Riding his golem, Luke realized that talking to Raoul had been a bad idea. Staring at the spot where he last saw Luke, Raoul pressed down and heard a rumble. Opening his tent, Raoul was able to pinpoint the location of Luke's village. When the soldiers saw Raoul still awake, they asked him if there was a problem. Raoul shared with his men that Luke had appeared in his tent and immediately ordered them to dig. When the soldiers dug at the spot where Luke had been, they never found a trace that Luke was there, making them believe that what Raoul saw may have been illusory magic or something similar. However, Raoul was convinced that he had truly seen the real Luke, as he noticed how Luke panicked when he drew his sword. Raoul also heard movement underground toward the wastelands after Luke vanished. After listening to Luke, it made Raoul wonder how powerful Luke's gift had truly become. Raoul thought that if he had fallen asleep, Luke could have ended his life right away. With his worry increasing, Raoul informed his men that Luke may have the ability to affect the environment with extremely high precision, and that they might already be in the palm of Luke's hand. Returning to the village, Luke's heart was still pounding loudly from what had happened. To Luke's surprise, both Selin and Melia were already waiting for him, exuding a menacing aura. Glaring at Luke, Selin reminded him that they were in an emergency and asked him where he had run off to. Luke explained that he had trouble sleeping and decided to go on a short walk, reassuring the two that he was fine. Melia, who had been very worried for Luke's safety since she could not find him after searching every corner of the village, stared at him with concern. Pressured, Luke eventually gave in and revealed that he had gone and talked to Raoul, which surprised the two ladies. Upon learning that Luke had jumped right into enemy territory using his gift, Selin scolded him for not being careful and insisted that Luke should have brought a guard along with him. Luke wanted his meeting with Raoul to be more private, so he decided to visit Raoul while he was in his quarters. Melia asked Luke how the meeting went. Luke shared that he had made Raoul angry and was certain that Raoul would now be more on guard than ever. Though Luke's plan to initiate a conversation with Raoul had failed, he did not regret his decision. 4 days later, Luke and the others could now see Raoul and his soldiers. Both leaders then ordered their men to move. As Luke met Raoul on the battlefield, he initiated the fight by launching a cannonball. However, Luke did not hit anyone, as they were out of range. Though Luke missed his first attack, he still ordered his men to continue with the assault. With Melia concerned for Luke's safety, she asked him to return inside the castle, which Luke followed. Seeing Luke going inside the village enraged Raoul, as he believed he was being underestimated by Luke. Raoul and his soldiers then initiated their own attack, rampaging against the village walls. When Raoul finally reached the door through which Luke had escaped, he continued to tear the door down. To Raoul's surprise, what he saw was yet another wall, but this one was so high that it almost reached the sky. Seeing movement from above, Raoul realized that the motion came from the ground, and he later understood that the path he was on was a trap. Raoul then ordered his men to look up, warning them that the ground was getting farther away from the village. He then ordered his men to hurriedly break down the walls. Raoul was soon informed by his men that they had found multiple doors, each leading to a dead end. Unbeknownst to Raoul, he and his men were trapped inside a maze that Luke had created. A few minutes before Raoul noticed what was happening, Selin informs Luke that the village is now surrounded. Though the village itself is also surrounded by multiple layers of walls, Selin doubts that Raoul and his men could ever reach them, which Luke also agrees with. Raoul thought of an idea and hastily created a maze. Luke believes that if Raoul's 5,000 troops were to move freely, then they would be having a problem. However, since they are all following Raoul's orders and are moving in one direction, Luke found them easy to deal with now. Selin pointed to the few soldiers in the rear, which Luke believed that those soldiers may be struggling in advancing and could no longer communicate with the rest. Although the others find Luke's strategy a bit harsh, Melia thought differently, even praising Luke for his plan. Firing the cannon and missing was all part of Luke's plan to lure the soldiers and Raoul closer, leading to them getting trapped into the maze. Luke informed everyone that they still have to be vigilant, as he is certain that Raoul would not lose his will to fight. Feeling overwhelmed, Raoul could not shake off the discomfort within himself. While seeing his soldiers slowly succumbing to giving up, Raoul received a report that the walls surrounding them are not an illusion but are the real deal. The soldier was not sure how many people Luke got to build the wall, but he is certain that Luke and his men had exhausted a lot of magic power. Agreeing with his soldier, Raoul then noticed that the movement had stopped, which made him believe that it was their chance to retaliate. Raoul then ordered his men to have each unit explore the surroundings while breaking the walls. As the soldiers continued to tear the walls down, some had slowly realized that the construction pattern is similar to a maze. Upon moving forward, the soldiers yet again encountered a dead end. However, what surprised them is that the path they took earlier was now blocked by another wall. With Luke's final move in closing the ceiling, he was very pleased to see his plan going smoothly. Although Selene was not a fan of Luke's plan, she saw the effectiveness of Luke's plan, which Luke only hoped that they could exhaust the soldiers and lower their numbers before they could reach the village. Though keeping the soldiers inside a loop is a great plan, Luke thought that it would be a problem if they continued with such a plan. Since their aim is for a peaceful solution without fighting, Selene stated that they needed to hammer that thought into their enemies' heads. As the day slowly faded away, Raoul had lost count of time as he was all alone. When Luke appeared in front of him, Raoul smiled and immediately charged at Luke. Believing that he could reach Luke, Raoul fell into a trap and warned his men about it, ordering them to fall back. When Raoul turned around, he saw that the path had changed again, making his men more farther from him. Defenseless and surrounded by elves with arrows, Raoul's soldiers started to panic and swam away from him. Raoul became agitated and ordered his men to not break formation. However, their fear got the best of them and they ignored Raoul's orders. Luke then approached Raoul and told him that neither he nor his men can kill him. Luke once again tried to explain to Raoul that he is not trying to bring House Albert down and only wished to live peacefully. Expressing his wishes with sincerity, Luke was only met with an angered expression from Raoul. Luke and his citizens were shocked when they saw Raoul running above water and heading towards them. When Raoul was about to land an attack on Luke, Noel came in time and used his shield to push Raoul away. Seeing his own men, Raoul asks them if they are not trying to embarrass him in front of their enemies. Unable to force themselves to disobey Raoul, the soldiers turned around and started to charge towards Luke and the others. Seeing the soldiers heading towards them, Luke reminded everyone to follow how they practiced. As the soldiers started attacking the villagers, they were shocked at how strong the villagers were, unable to push them away. No matter how elite the soldiers are, Luke was certain that they are now getting tired from the effects of the skills. Another advantage Luke has is the skill he received upon surpassing 10,000 villagers. The village enhancement. The skill's effect temporarily increases the status of villagers. The duration varies depending on the level of enhancement. When the effect wears off, the cooldown for the skill is about 1 hour. As long as the people under Luke's control are villagers, then he can apply his skill onto them. The villagers who have shown their enhanced power start to mock and tease the soldiers. When Selene notices how the villagers are acting, she then warns them that such naivety could get them killed. Raoul was shocked when he saw Selene, as he did not expect that she would be with Luke. Selene then retaliates, launching her ice magic onto Raoul and his men. Raoul and his men are now getting pushed back and are also facing difficulty with the unstable ground. What added to Raoul's problem is when a dragon appeared behind them, causing his men to panic. When the soldiers noticed that the dragon was only targeting them, they guessed that Luke also possessed a monster tamer. Even with such disadvantage, Raoul still tries to fight his way out. Selene was very much confused as to how Raoul could still fight when his 5,000 men had dwindled down to almost nothing. Before Raoul could get close to Selene, Luke stops him by manipulating the earth. With his head getting hit, Raoul starts to lose consciousness. When Raoul was still a young boy, he had always felt like he had been stuck in a fog. Raoul had faced mockery and insults even from the housemaids, who called him a peasant for not being able to eat properly. The only person who had comforted Raoul and believed that he should be the next family head was none other than his mother. No matter what Raoul did, it never went well and had always caused trouble for his mother and the other adults. Raoul's mother was a maid for House Albert, but was then chosen as a concubine when the lord's legal wife had difficulty bearing an offspring. However, shortly after Raoul's mother got pregnant, news spread that the legal wife was also with child. As the concubine's son, Raoul was made the second son despite Luke being born a few days later than him. From Raoul's point of view, Luke could do anything and everything. Unlike Raoul, who had always caused trouble for others, Luke received constant praise. Wishing to be like Luke, Raoul tried copying whatever his brother was doing. However, it did not result in anything, as the staff only thought that Raoul was merely imitating Luke. Raoul tried a different plan and started to get close with Luke. Seeing Raoul trying to practice swordsmanship, the soldiers believed that if Raoul did not excel in sword wielding, then there would be no place for him at House Albert. Since copying Luke was not enough, Raoul thought that he might gain favor by defeating Luke. However, instead of praise, Raoul received a hard scolding. As a young boy, Raoul had no idea what was happening and ended up pushing the instructor away and continued to hit him with the sword. Seeing the instructor all beaten up, Raoul felt that the fog blocking his vision was getting clearer. Seeing a new purpose for himself, Raoul started acting like a delinquent, causing serious trouble for the staff at House Albert. Although the people around saw how Raoul was getting more violent, for Raoul, he wasn't in the wrong and was just acting in the easiest way he could live his life. While trying to bully a kid, Raoul froze when he accidentally hit Luke. After the incident in the inner garden, Luke started keeping an eye on Raoul at times. With things finally starting to get easier for Raoul, he felt like everything was starting to fall over again with Luke involving himself. Luke's existence made Raoul miserable. After being told by Luke that he shouldn't be doing such terrible things, Raoul thought that Luke had more things to say, but it only made him mad when Luke walked away. Afterwards, despite being so beloved, not a single person came to stand up for Luke. A man told Raoul how Luke is portrayed as someone to be so very kind. However, the man could only see a weak-minded person in Luke, which is the reason why the man needed Luke's strength. The man expressed how extremely pleased he is that he can finally express his thoughts freely. When Raoul told the man that he was all right, the man was beaming with happiness. The man is so relieved to hear Raoul say those things about him. The man then expressed how painful it was to watch how Luke was spoiled just because he was the firstborn. Even after all the education, Luke's swordsmanship was simply atrocious. It wasn't that Luke had some sort of understanding with those around, or that he was always right. After listening to the man, Raoul smirks and suddenly throws the glass at the man's head. Confused, the man asks Raoul why. However, instead of justifying his action, Raoul only laughed. Seeing everyone's confused look, Raoul asked what the problem was and suggested that they laugh with him. The man and the maids were forced to laugh along with Raoul as they did not want to face consequences. In the end, the only one who swore loyalty to Luke after he was expelled was a single maid. Raoul gradually stopped hearing Luke's name around the mansion. As time flies by, Raoul starts hearing his name more and more, even from his father. Looking back, Raoul didn't care about having anyone's approval as long as Luke wasn't around. Noticing how quiet the place is, Raoul's eyes widened when he heard that Luke had built a utopia in the wasteland. People started talking about how the place Luke created had an abundance of food and rumors that Luke accepted any and all. News about Luke was spread around by commoners. Raoul broke a cold sweat as he thought that things were starting up again. Other people thought that it was some kind of trap to kidnap people by exploiting the noble name. People even laugh at commoners, as they believe that only commoners are being fooled by such lies. However, since the rumor included Luke, others started to wonder if the rumors are just rumors or the truth. Wanting to know the truth, people all around hoped that Luke would respond to them. Raoul starts panicking, hoping that Luke and everyone who's mentioning his name would go away. The doubts from the people's mouths vanished, as they now wanted the rumors about Luke to be true and even hoped that they could join Luke in the paradise he created. Knowing the type of person Luke is, others are certain that Luke would gladly accept them. When Luke tells Raoul that he came to talk to him, this ignited Raoul's anger and made him want Luke to stop getting in his way. Selin senses something and turns to look at Raoul. Seeing a huge explosion, Selin tries to cover Luke. Confused, Luke wonders what that was, as the wall he made just suddenly broke. Raoul has finally lost control of his rage. Philia sensed an incredible fighting spirit from Raoul and immediately drew her bow and told everyone to stay back. With Raoul charging towards them, everyone was ordered to shoot Raoul down. However, the arrows easily crumbled with one swing of Raoul's sword. Philia tells Luke to fall back at once. To protect Luke, Noel stepped in between and used his shield bash to hold off Raoul's attack. Fueled with anger, Raoul vows to never be beaten again. Raoul's attack was so powerful that it blew Noel away. After launching a powerful attack, Raoul then sensed an incoming attack on his right and immediately blocked Selin's sneak attack. Observing Raoul, Selin realized that Raoul had stopped fighting back. Selin was surprised when she saw Raoul suddenly dashing away from her. Selin had no plans on letting Raoul get away. Using her ice magic, Selin tries subduing Raoul. To Selin's surprise, Raoul is not even trying to avoid her attacks, acting like he no longer cares if he dies. Seeing Raoul coming towards him, Luke generates a wall to block him. However, Raoul easily destroyed it, acting like a true madman. Raoul tells Luke that he already knows what Luke is thinking and that Luke still didn't want to kill Raoul, not wanting his hands to get dirty. Raoul believes that Luke had never taken him so seriously. Swinging his sword, Raoul orders Luke to kill him, making Luke's hands dirty. If Luke does not take action first, Raoul reassures him that he would certainly be killed. That is the end of the recap at Chapter 48. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.